Marvel, Reincarnation Paradise. Chapter 61. Don't be afraid, it only takes one sip and it will be over soon. In the valley, the symbiote's sharp teeth were exposed and his tone was solemn. As he spoke, his arms gradually extended and lengthened, and in an instant they transformed into two thick long knives with exaggerated shapes. Bang! A large cloud of smoke exploded, and a pit appeared where the symbiote originally stood. The headless body standing next to it was torn to pieces by the wind and turned into mutilated pieces of flesh that fell into the pit. The position of the saber suddenly resounded with a continuous sound of cutting blades. His eyes moved quickly, holding a dog-legged knife in each hand, and a ball of silver light danced around him, and bright sparks continued to bloom outside the silver light. The dog-legged knife and the symbiote's thick long knife collided dozens of times in a few seconds. Silky lines spread on the knife body, and the durability dropped rapidly. The saber felt that his hands began to numb from the tremors, and the tiger's mouth was already bloody. Saber, flash! Icicle! Shuanghan's cry came from behind, the saber's legs sank, and the dog-legged knife in his hand glowed red, crossing and slashing forward, the dog-legged knife collided with the symbiote's blade. After two soft sounds, the dog-leg knife simply shattered into dozens of fragments, but the red light on the knife was transferred to the symbiote's blade. The red light quickly covered the symbiote's body along the blade, causing its movements to suddenly freeze, as if it had turned into a black statue. After the saber controlled the opponent, its sinking legs suddenly exerted force, and its figure was already jumping high. Rise! A biting chill came from the back, and a blue crescent moon exuding a strong cold air flew from behind. The upper end of the crescent moon almost brushed the back of the saber that jumped high, and the front end went straight towards the current. The symbiote, restrained by the red light, left an ice path along the way, and all the flowers and plants it passed turned into ice crystals. The body of the symbiote was stagnant. As soon as the saber in front of it jumped out of sight, a blue crescent moon rushed towards it, as if it would be split into two pieces in the next moment. The situation was critical, but his huge mouth was even more open, his narrow white eyes were slightly narrowed, and the thick long knives that were crossed in front of him in a chopping shape began to twist and deform, and the two long knives merged into one giant heavy shield. The crescent moon collided with the heavy shield, exploding a large amount of cold air and covering a few meters with a layer of white frost. The symbiote remained stable under the impact, but the heavy shield turned into an ice wall, with many ferocious creatures growing on it. Ice spike! On the other side, the saber that jumped back had already landed, and the familiar crackling sound of ice sickles sounded in front. He looked up, but in front of him was not the ice sculpture he expected to see, but a glimpse of the ferocious ice wall crashing towards him. How come? The ice wall was now approaching, and the saber that had just landed clearly failed to react in time. After spitting out 3 words, it was knocked away by the rushing ice wall. Ice shards splashed everywhere, blood spurted out, and there were several blood holes in the saber that flew out, with some broken and ferocious ice spikes stuck on it. Shuanghan, who was at the very back of the battlefield, felt anxious when he saw the saber being knocked away. Not only did his ice sickle not make any achievements, but it became a weapon for the enemy to beat down his teammates. Now that his teammates were severely injured, he could only fight on his own. As for surrender, from the moment the symbiote bit off Lang Yan's head, he knew that surrender would just be more humiliation. Although the opponent's detection skills showed that they were contractors, they were obviously no longer the same species as them. Ice gun breaks! With a low voice, the staff in Shuanghan's hand was suspended in front of him. The tip of the staff was pointed at the ice wall in front of him and began to rotate. The dense frost elements gathered towards the staff during the rotation, eventually turning the staff into a crystal-clear stick. Ice spear, the tip of the spear is cold and cold. The ice gun solidified and shot out immediately. During the flight, the ice gun continued to rotate and absorb elements, and its size continued to increase. When it approached the ice wall, the slender ice gun had turned into a giant icicle. Behind the heavy shield and ice wall, the symbiote who had just knocked the saber away was full of irritation. Just when he was about to taste the saber head first, the coldness hit him again. He hated being disturbed while eating. You are really looking for death? Facing the icicles shooting towards them, the already thick lower limbs of the symbiote once again grew in size by 3 points, and the exaggerated muscle bundles exploded. After an explosion, the symbiote held a heavy shield and crashed into the direction of the icicles. During the collision, a sharp vertebral body suddenly appeared in the center of the heavy shield. The vertebral body quickly elongated. The thick heavy shield was like a thin piece of silk cloth. It was pierced by the sharp cone protruding from the rear, and the ice wall cracked. The entire body turned into a spiral-pointed cone, colliding with the speeding icicles. The two were facing each other tit for tat, and the crackling sounds were endless. The result was clear at a glance. The hardness of the icicles was obviously inferior to that of the spiral cones. As the broken ice splashed, the sharp cone was as strong as a broken bamboo, and the icicles collapsed bit by bit, until the staff at the center of the icicle was also broken by the sharp cone, and the icicles instantly disintegrated into a large piece of cold air. The sharp cone still continued to speed after piercing the icicle, and in Zhuanghan's desperate eyes, it plunged into his chest. After the front end of the cone penetrated its back, the symbiote stopped. Zhuanghan was hung high on the cone. The gurgling blood continued to flow along the spiral pattern on the cone. Zhuanghan stared at the symbiote underneath him. His eyes were crazy, and his whole body began to light up with blue light. Suffering from the cold tear, blood rained down, and before Zhuanghan could use his ultimate move, he was torn into two pieces. His body was thrown away, and his head flew high. Before he lost consciousness, he couldn't help but feel a trace of annoyance in his heart. I should have known I would have learned the fire method. The arms of the symbiote below have turned into two evenly spaced semi-cones. He raised his head and looked at the head above, his sharp teeth opened, and his neck turned into a black python, like a python pouncing on food. His body remained motionless. But the head flew out and swallowed the frosty head in mid-air. The terrifying sound of chewing spread again in the valley. Perish together? Ha! After swallowing the flesh and blood in his mouth, the symbiote's neck had returned to its original shape. He looked at the two corpses on the ground with a sarcastic tone. Call out! There was a sound of breaking through the air, and the symbiote turned its head slightly, and a flashing red dagger passed across its cheek, followed by a series of sound of breaking through the air, and dozens of daggers flew over, all with gorgeous red light. The symbiote, which had suffered losses before, did not choose to resist. After a few twists, he was out of the range of the dagger. His body that could deform at will made his movement weird and changeable, making it difficult to aim. Everyone is so impatient. After getting away from the group of daggers, the symbiote stood back up and turned its gaze to the saber standing precariously not far away. It exerted force on its shoulders, and the semi-cone-like arms turned into two spears as they swung. Then the spears were suddenly struck by the symbiote flung out. Amidst the whistling sound, the saber, which was originally a powerful crossbow, was penetrated directly by the spear. The spear was inserted into the ground diagonally from left to right. The intersection in the middle was the abdomen of the saber. Strings of blood fell to the ground, and the saber collapsed. On top of the spear, the sound of unheard footsteps sounded, and the symbiote walked slowly in. At this time, the black liquid on his shoulders was surging, and after a while, a pair of brand new arms emerged from the black liquid, with sharp claws. As soon as he got closer, the limp saber suddenly raised his head and showed a blood-soaked smile to the approaching symbiote. Boom! Violent sound waves rose into the sky along with firelight in the valley. A figure in the distance who was rushing towards the valley suddenly raised his head. Chapter 62. The aftermath of the saber's self-destruction lasted for several minutes before it subsided. By this time, the originally beautiful valley had become a mess. The strong smell of blood before had been completely washed away by the smell of gunpowder smoke, and the green grass had all turned black. There were scattered earth and rocks everywhere and some pieces of burnt meat whose ingredients could not be identified. On the west side of the valley, a large crater several meters wide suddenly appeared at the starting point of the explosion, with thick smoke billowing from the crater. The entire valley became dead silent, as if all life had been extinguished in the previous explosion, until a thin crackling sound broke the silence of the valley. The small lake in the center of the valley, which had plenty of water before, has turned into a small puddle after the explosion. In the center of the puddle stood a black stone egg of about 2 meters, and a thin clicking sound came from the stone egg. The stone egg continued to tremble amidst the rattling sounds, and broken lines began to spread on the stone egg. After an explosion, the stone egg disintegrated into countless fragments and flew away, and the symbiote appeared on the spot. It's just that now, he is obviously much smaller than before. From the previous 2.5 meters, which can be called a small giant, he has collapsed to the current normal human height of less than 2 meters. Damn guy, wasting my life-saving skills. The symbiote's expression was gloomy, and his long and narrow eyes looking at the large pit in front were full of hatred. If the saber hadn't been dead in the previous explosion, he would have wanted to turn the saber's body out, crush the bones and scatter the ashes. After gasping and staring at the pit for a long time, the symbiote turned his gaze away. Sound waves, flames, these old tricks again. I said those of your kind know my weaknesses and must quickly find a way to overcome them. Forget it, leave this shabby place first and look for any nearby villages. It will take at least 100 people to make up for the loss this time. What? Warning? That thing is useless. If you don't want to live, I still want to live. While talking to himself, the symbiote stepped out of the puddle and walked out of the valley. After taking a few steps, the symbiote paused, and a faint chill came from behind, but it was different from the physical chill brought by the previous mage. The second was a faint sense of fear coming from the soul. The symbiote turned around, and in front of it was a tall figure wearing a black cloak and holding a Fangtian painted halberd. Su Yu's eyes scanned the devastated environment around him, and finally landed on the symbiote in front of him. It seems I'm lucky, I still have a chance to be a fisherman. Are you Venom? After hearing Venom's name, the symbiote's gloomy face suddenly became furious, its sharp teeth opened wide, and it roared loudly at Su Yu. Roar! I am not the traitor like Venom, I am. Before he finished speaking, a square-shaped painted halberd came towards him with an extreme sense of oppression. Pressed by the hunting wind, the symbiote's cheeks were swollen, and its long and narrow eyes were enlarged, with a tendency to become round. If you can't catch this halberd, you might die. An idea suddenly flashed through his mind. Stimulated by fear, his arms turned into a heavy shield at an extremely fast speed and enveloped himself in front of him. Boom! With the blow of Fang Tian's painted halberd, a dull sound wave exploded, along with the heavy black shield that collided with the halberd. At the moment of contact, the thick heavy shield shattered into pieces like fragile porcelain. The symbiote turned into a black shadow and flew straight out, sending out a large amount of smoke behind it. Su Yu looked confused as he watched the symbiote fly out like a baseball. This strength is quite average. The voice is quite small. I want to eat you, I must eat you, roar. Angry roars came from the smoke, and the symbiote turned over and stared at Su Yu with splitting eyes, and its white eyes tended to gradually turn red. The muscles in his lower limbs swelled, and veins bulged. After an explosion on the ground, the symbiote flew towards Su Yu at a speed that was no less than the speed it flew out before. During the flying process, the symbiote's arms stretched forward, and the two palms stretched up and down, turning into a sharp crescent. The blade cut through the airflow. The entire offensive posture was very similar to the ice sickle used by the mage before. Su Yu looked at the speeding crescent moon and licked his lips. He held the tail end of Fang Tianhua's halberd in both hands, twisted his waist and swung his arms, swinging the halberd in his hand in an extremely standard swinging posture. Boom! Another sound wave exploded, and the crescent moon was also shattered into fragments all over the sky with one blow, while the symbiote exploded out at a faster speed and landed at its previous location. This time Su Yu didn't wait for the attack. He bent his feet slightly and stamped on the ground, pulling out a black shadow in the air. In an instant, his body had reached the position in front of the symbiotic body. Before the smoke and dust in front of him dispersed, Fang Tian's painted halberd fell from the air. The ground was cracked inch by inch amid the rumbling sound. Where the halberd fell, the ground was sunken and gravel splashed, but the dark figure of the symbiote was nowhere to be seen. When he was confused, a slight tingling sensation suddenly appeared in his jaw. Su Yu's body leaned back violently. The moment he leaned back, a slender sharp blade pierced out from the ground at an extremely fast speed. The blade almost touched Su Yu's body. The jaw crossed. After landing on the ground, the symbiote's hands turned into drills, and it quickly burrowed into the ground to lurk. When Su Yu came close, it stabbed out its long blade and attacked in a sneak attack, intending to cut Su Yu's intestines and stomach and penetrate it straight into the skull. Unfortunately, before the warning of the beast's intuition, this sneak attack was fruitless. Since the sneak attack failed, the symbiote was no longer hiding and burst out of the ground. At this time, Su Yu had already jumped several meters away. As soon as the symbiote jumped out of the ground, he saw a bit of cold light piercing his eyebrows. The bone-deep chill seemed to have frightened the symbiote out of his wits. He actually stood still, and the tip of Fang Tian's painted halberd went straight through his skull, bringing him with it. There were bursts of black ripples. Su Yu, who was holding Fang Tian's painted halberd, raised his eyebrows slightly. This touch felt wrong. It didn't feel like it was stabbing the skull at all. It seemed like it was stabbing into a wave of water. Sure enough, after being pierced into the head by Fang Tianhua's halberd, the symbiote's expression remained unchanged, but there was a weird smile on the corner of his mouth, and then his head pierced by the halberd suddenly collapsed into black liquid water waves. The water waves turned into soft tentacles and tightly wrapped around the head of Fang Tian's painted halberd, while the sharp blade transformed from the arm under the head had already pierced out, heading towards Su Yu's throat. At this time, the weapon in Su Yu's hand was restrained, and the sharp blade under his body was coming. In the symbiote's expectation, the opponent would either give up and abandon the weapon, or be stabbed through the throat and die. After he entered the paradise, he had relied on this endlessly changing form to kill many opponents. He is a parasite. As long as the host in the body does not die, then he has no vital points, and things like heads are the best. Bait. In the expectation of the symbiote, the sharp blade got closer and closer to the throat with a whistling sound, but when it was about to get closer, it was firmly grasped by a silver hand. The corner of Su Yu's mouth cracked, and the palm holding the sharp blade shook. Under the explosion of strength, the sharp blade in the palm disintegrated into broken pieces. Then the halberd in his right hand was pulled back, and the symbiote still locked on the halberd head was also pulled towards Su Yu. Pfft! The sound of sharp claws piercing the human body was heard, and bits of blood dripped from Su Yu's hands. While pulling back the symbiote, the nails of his left hand had begun to extend, and the steel left hand suddenly turned into a ferocious sharp claw, which penetrated fiercely. It penetrated the chest of the symbiote in front of him, and also penetrated the host inside the chest. Since the head is a trap, with the current size of the symbiote, the host can only hide in the chest. The warm blood slides down the silver claws, and the black symbiote begins to twist wildly, but the strength is getting smaller and smaller. It was powerless to shake Su Yu's steel arm. Looking down indifferently at the black liquid twisting on his arm, Su Yu said lightly. You're not the only one who can transform, understand? End. Roar. The turbulent sound waves exploded with Su Yu as the center. Stimulated by the huge sound spread at such a close distance, the symbiote in front of him began to twist and cry, and then condensed into a ball of dark viscous liquid and separated from the host in Su Yu's hand. Was blown away by the air waves of the war cry. The violator who was penetrated by Su Yu's left hand turned into a pale young boy after the symbiote separated. After being penetrated through his chest, he was already in a state of near death. Coupled with the impact of the war cry at close range, he was now only a hair away from death. Throwing the boy hanging on his arm to the ground casually, Su Yu's right hand, Fang Tian's painted halberd, which had been freed from its restraints, tapped lightly on the ground, and suddenly the red and white pieces fell to pieces on the ground. Also, you are not the only one who has a loud voice and roars. I also understand a little bit. Chapter 63. Purple fire rose in the valley, and the corpses on the ground turned into charred powder, mixed with the originally charred earth, and no traces could be seen anymore. The violator has been killed, but the hunting mission has not been completed. Su Yu looked down at the black viscous liquid that was twisting on the ground not far away and thought deeply. It seemed that this thing was also classified as illegal by the park. Part of the person. He stood Fang Tian's painted halberd aside and slowly approached the symbiote on the ground. As soon as he walked a little closer, the symbiote on the ground suddenly burst out. It jumped up like a big black spider, jumped onto Su Yu's feet, and then quickly began to spread. Although Violator No. 14,673 died, the symbiote was not sad, but more excited. The person who defeated it in front of him was the best host. The unparalleled power and domineering spirit simply intoxicated it, and it had begun to dream about how powerful they would become if they coexisted with the man in front of them. After successfully climbing onto Su Yu's leg, the symbiote trembled with excitement. As long as it can successfully parasitize this person, it will have no fear. Its body that can change it will combined with this person's special metallization, he can ignore even sound waves and flames. Nothing. As long as it invades his skin and dissolves into his flesh and blood, the symbiote will have a way of making it impossible for this person to separate himself. In the excitement and trembling, the gradually spreading symbiote suddenly stiffened. Where is the skin? What about flesh and blood? The symbiote feels as if it is not parasitizing a human being, but a steel statue, a steel creation that cannot even feel the pores and gaps. Su Yu looked at the symbiote that began to cling to his calf with disgust. His whole body trembled, and his leg made a series of muffled sounds like firecrackers, followed by the symbiote's screams and thick black liquid shaking from his leg. Falling, twisting, and rolling on the ground. Want to parasitize me? Frowning as he stared at the writhing symbiote below, Su Yu took out an ordinary steel ingot, ignited the fire and turned it into a puddle of molten steel, and then threw the molten steel in his hand to the position of the symbiote on the ground. Suddenly, two moving liquids on the ground, one silver and one black, began to entangle with each other. Silver and black tentacles began to entangle each other. Weird hissing sounds continued to spread. After a while, Su Yu rubbed his swollen head, and the ground there was only a round metal ball left on it. He bent down and picked up the metal ball on the ground. As soon as he got it in his hand, he seemed to feel Su Yu's approach. The metal ball in his hand shook violently, and some tiny bulges gradually appeared on the surface of the ball. The symbiote began to struggle crazily inside the ball. Su Yu snorted coldly, shook his arm, and the metal ball in his hand suddenly buzzed. The sound waves continued to echo in the space inside the ball. The symbiote in the ball was completely paralyzed by the stimulation of the sound waves. After a few seconds, the vibration disappeared and the metal ball stopped shaking. Instead, a hoarse voice came from the metal ball. I am willing to surrender to you absolutely. As long as you accept my symbiosis, I can greatly strengthen your body and strength. Coupled with my ability to change at will, you will become unchangingly powerful, stronger than anyone else. I believe me, we are a perfect match. Ah! Listening to the chattering in the ball, Su Yu sneered and did not reply. Instead, he controlled the metal ball to secrete a marble-sized bead, which was wrapped with a trace amount of symbiont tissue, and then took out a mirror from the space. This is a divination mirror purchased in the park to cope with the hunting mission. Su Yu controlled the marbles in his hand to unfold, and a drop of black liquid dripped onto the mirror. The mirror was like a pool of lake water, swallowing up the twisting black liquid. Then the mirror began to fluctuate. After a while, a black and 4 red colors began to appear on it. There are 5 light spots, the largest red dot and black dot are very close to each other, and the remaining 3 small red dots are scattered everywhere. Sure enough. Looking at the positioning light spot in the divination mirror, Su Yu raised the metal ball in his hand with a playful tone. It's quite lively. Wah! What? The chattering voice of the symbiote in the metal ball paused, and his tone was a little panicked. Nothing, farewell. As he spoke, Su Yu took back the magic mirror, then took out a small spray can, connected the nozzle to the metal ball, and pressed the switch. The next moment, blazing flames poured out from the nozzle, filling the inside of the metal ball. The symbiote's desperate wails echoed throughout the ball. No, no, I can make you stronger, Ah! Su Yu burned it for about 3 minutes, and after making sure that there was no more sound coming from the ball, he squeezed the red-hot metal ball in his hand. The metal ball shattered into pieces under his silver palm, with some identification in the middle. A black residue with no ingredients. The flame resistance effect brought by swallowing fire-patterned steel is very good. The burning red metal ball still feels a little warm in his hand. He can buy more special metals in the future. While improving his physical fitness, he can also brush various types of metal balls. Resistance. Patting the black ashes on his hands, Su Yu held Fang Tian's painted halberd in one hand and the divination mirror in the other, and walked out of the valley. Finally, he solved the remaining 3 minor troubles and marked the beginning of his career as a hunter. The first hunting mission was successfully completed. On the outskirts of the imperial capital, the sun was gradually setting in the west. The reddish rays of light pour into the lush forest. The rays pass through the sparse branches and green leaves, casting a large mottled light and shadow on the ground. In the interlaced light and shadow, a coyote tramples the fallen leaves on the ground, and in the dense forest, running away quickly. The sharp claws of the wolf clawed through the earth and rocks, leaving deep marks on the ground. It also made the coyote faster and faster. However, even though it had been running away for more than half an hour, the coldness behind it still clung to it and became stronger and stronger. It is getting stronger and stronger, which makes it dare not stop at all. Call out! Several soft sounds were heard from above. The coyote pressed its front paws to the ground, kicked its hind feet diagonally, and jumped sideways. 2 arrows with flame patterns appeared from behind. One grazed the waist and abdomen, and the other scratched the neck. Although it missed, it left 2 lines of black burn marks on the coyote's fur. The coyote landed, but the 3rd arrow had already followed. This time, the coyote was not so lucky to escape. The arrow cut through a fallen leaf floating in the air and pierced the coyote hard of the hind legs and penetrated directly. After the arrow entered the body, the red lines on the arrow quickly glowed, and the entire arrow seemed to turn into a soldering iron, and a large flame ignited with a roar from the coyote's hind legs. Ouch! A shrill wail came out of the coyote's mouth. It fell to the ground and started rolling left and right, trying to extinguish the flames on its hind legs, but if the arrow was not removed, the flames would only grow stronger. During the struggle, dark viscous liquid emerged from under the coyote's fur, instantly turning the relatively mighty coyote into a ferocious monster. The black liquid on the monster's body gathered into a tentacle, and the tentacle stretched backwards, trying to remove the arrow hanging from his hind leg. But just after wrapping around the arrow shaft, the lines on the arrow lit up again, red light emerged, the blazing high temperature made the monster wail again, the tentacles also collapsed, and there was a faint smell of meat in the air. In desperation, the monster opened its mouth, stretched its neck like a snake around its back, bit the hind leg pierced by the arrow with its sharp teeth, and pulled hard. Tear. There was a tearing sound that was heartbreaking, and the entire hind leg was torn off by it. The white bone stubble, pink muscles, and peristaltic blood vessels and nerves at the section were clearly visible, and a large amount of smelly blood spurted out. The monster put its hind legs that were still burning in its mouth far away. Black waves surged across its body, and the tiny flames remaining on its fur were directly submerged. The wound on its hind legs that was spewing blood was also filled with black liquid, and then it quickly grew a brand new pitch black hind legs. It started running again. Chapter 64. After the monster escaped, only a hind leg that was almost burnt was left on the spot, and the air was filled with a strong aroma of meat. Gentle footsteps sounded, and then Su Yu came slowly from behind. He was not in a hurry to chase the escaped coyote. With the divination mirror, that thing couldn't escape. He has solved 2 of the 3 hidden dangers left by the symbiote, namely a brown bear and an elk. The coyote that escaped before was the last one. Symbiotes have the characteristic of dividing and reproducing. The typical example is Venom and his sons who love and kill each other, but this one is different. What it splits is not the offspring, but himself. It seems to be able to transfer its main consciousness among these split bodies. When Su Yu appeared in front of the first split body, the first reaction of that split body was to run away and began to beg Su Yu for mercy. This also made Su Yu understand this split body and the main body in the valley actually belong to the same one. This is a very powerful life-saving ability. Although the ability of the split body is very different from that of the main body, as long as life is still there, everything is possible. It's just a pity that this time it met Su Yu, who had prepared a divination mirror in advance. This ability is a magical skill if it is not exposed, but when the position of the split body is locked, it is just hanging on. He was not in a hurry to kill the last coyote parasite, as he could take this opportunity to experiment with the bow and arrow he had forged and upgraded. At this time, Su Yu, who was holding 2 fire-patterned arrows in his hand, was squatting in front of the burned coyote's hind legs and looking at it carefully. The tempting smell of meat was constantly pouring into his nostrils. Su Yu scratched the surface of the hind legs with the tip of the arrow in his hand. The charred skin peeled off one after another, and a burst of heat emerged. What was exposed under the black scab was the roasted and tender wolf meat. The hind legs were cut open by the arrow, and the oozing out it's not dull blood, but golden grease. This wolf leg is already cooked. Within a few minutes of being hit by the arrow, the entire leg was directly roasted. This terrifying ability makes people's scalp numb, because the wolf's leg that was hit by the arrow is not very impressive at the moment. But imagine, if the arrow hits a human leg, then the extremity will become necrotic in a few seconds, and the human leg will be cooked in a few minutes. The effect is stronger than expected, not bad. After assessing the effect, Su Yu reached out and pulled out the arrow still stuck in his hind leg. The flame pattern on the arrow was still glowing, and the arrow body was like a soldering iron. Only after it was tempered and had flame resistance, Su Yu dared to pull it out with bare hands. After the arrow was separated from the flesh and blood, the red light gradually dimmed. The red light subsided and the arrow body returned to a cold metallic touch, but the fire patterns on it were much thinner than the other 2 in Su Yu's hands. It's very powerful, but it consumes a lot of energy. After comparing the changes in the arrows, he clicked on the arrow introduction. Fire pattern arrow. Place of origin, Samsara Paradise, Xinhuo. Quality, green. Category, arrow. Durability, 20/30. Attack power, 10 to 18. Equipment requirements, 9 points of physical strength, 10 points of fire resistance. Equipment effect 1, Burning, passive, after hitting the target, it will continue to cause burning damage. Tip: when blazing is in effect, durability will continue to be consumed. When the durability disappears, the equipment will be broken. Rating: 20. Note: green equipment is rated from 11 to 30. Introduction: Arrow? No. I am the fire, the magma, your nightmare. Price: 2,300 paradise coins. After one arrow, 1/3 of the durability disappeared, and it can still be used twice. This kind of arrow cannot be used as a disposable tool. After consuming a lot of fire patterned steel and high quality fire, Su Yu made it. 5 of them are worth a lot of money. Fortunately, each arrow can be used 3 times, but it is more troublesome to recycle it. He put away the 3 arrows in his hand and accepted that Su Yu was not going to use this thing anymore. This shot was not just arrows, but a lot of them. Paradise coins are not worth using to deal with this mere splinter body. After putting away the fire-patterned arrows, Su Yu took out the Xiaoyun Bao and put it on his shoulder. This was enough for him to use next. The Xiaoyun Bao, which had been reforged with fire-patterned steel, had undergone many changes compared to its previous shape. The shape of the Bao is more open, with dense flame patterns coiling around it, and a faint red light continues to flow on the Bao arms. Howling Cloud Bao, rare. Place of origin: Samsara Paradise, Xinhuo. Quality: green. Category: Han Bao. Durability: 40/40. Attack power: 14 to 26. Equipment requirements: 9 points of strength, 10 points of stamina. Equipment effect 1, Xiangxia, active, consumes 40 mana points, enhances the flight speed of the next arrow by 40%, and comes with 30 points of fire damage. It can cause a pyrotechnic effect after hitting the target. Tip: the cooldown time of Xiangxia, active, is 100 minutes. Equipment effect 2, like arm-wielding fingers, passive, when the caster uses it, the arrow accuracy +3, with 5 points of fire damage. Rating: 30. Note: the rating of green equipment ranges from 11 to 30. Green equipment with a rating of 30 will be marked rare and have special attributes attached. Introduction: the grass in the dark forest is frightened by the wind, and the general draws his bow at night. He looks for the white feather in the ordinary day, but it is lost in the stone edges. Price: 4,600 paradise coins. The golden crow falls in the west and the jade rabbit rises in the east. The lush forest outside the imperial capital is already full of clear light. It is the moonlight reflected in the thousands of acres of forest and the scattered stars in the thousands of miles of mist. In a certain corner of Milan, unlike other places that are cold, this place seems quite lively. Red lights flash across the air from time to time, the hot breath spreads, and sparks bloom on the ground, but it almost disappeared, but it also scared the nearby predatory beasts away from them. This place is already relatively close to the imperial capital, so monsters are very scarce. They are basically ordinary beasts, and the fear of fire has been deeply embedded in the genes of every beast. But among them, a dark wolf-shaped monster is extremely conspicuous. The monster is similar in shape to a coyote, but has a black liquid that is constantly twisting all over its body, as well as sharp and exposed sharp teeth and narrow white eyes on its head. His identity as a monster was revealed in every way. There are many ferocious monsters deep in the outskirts of the imperial capital, but not many are as ugly as this. Now this ferocious monster is fleeing for its life in the dense forest. Behind it are streaks of red light. After the red light hits the ground, the prototype is revealed on the ground. They are ordinary arrows. While running away, the symbiote's heart was full of despair. From the red glow to the moonrise, he kept running away without daring to stop for a moment, but the hunter behind him still lingered, teasing it like a cat and a mouse. Every time it hunts for a period of time, it will disappear and then appear again, making it constantly exhausted. While running, arrows behind it will appear from time to time. Although there were no more fire-patterned arrows like the one he faced for the first time in the subsequent arrows, these ordinary arrows also contained considerable flame power, and every time he was hit by an arrow, he suffered excruciating pain. Moreover, the accuracy of the arrows of the villain behind has become higher and higher. Call out! There was another whistle in his ears, and the running symbiote suddenly stopped running. The falling arrow pierced the back hard, and a fire appeared where the arrow hit. The viscous liquid near the fire shivered and everyone avoided it. After the fire disappeared, the liquid spread again and squeezed out the arrow inserted into the body. Severe pain spread quickly from the center of the arrow to the whole body, but the symbiote only trembled and then returned to calmness. He was numbed by the shots along the way. He was almost used to this kind of pain, and his fire resistance even increased. A little. The sound of faint footsteps came from behind, and then the cold tone of the villain. "Oh, don't run away." The symbiote turned around with a look of despair on its face. It knew that it had no hope of survival, and continuing to escape would only increase the torture. "What on earth do you want?" Chapter 65. The symbiote's questions spread in the quiet jungle. Su Yu stopped. Of course, he didn't have any bad hobbies of torturing prey. He just wanted to take this opportunity to gain some hunting experience. He had no hunting experience before, and had very little experience in this area. He had only learned some skills online, but only on paper. But now that he has taken on the job of being a hunter, it is foreseeable that such things will become commonplace for him in the future. Naturally, he must take this opportunity to train hard and turn the written knowledge in his mind into practice. After more than 6 hours of hunting, the results were pretty good. His ability to track prey has improved significantly. In the last 2 hours, he had been able to lock the symbiote only through traces of escape along the way without relying on the divination mirror for positioning. The intelligence attribute of 12 points makes his observation and information gathering abilities extremely strong, which plays a big role in the hunting process. If you don't want to escape, then just die. Wait a minute, our cooperation is a win-win situation. Killing them all won't do you any good, right? We can go back to the paradise and sign a contract. I promise to be completely obedient, and we will be slaves and maids. The symbiote in front of him was still trying his best to talk, his attitude was sincere, even flattering, but Su Yu did not have any fluctuations in this. Since the hunting ability could no longer gain any experience on the symbiote, he was not ready to waste any more time. The long bow in his hand was opened, and with the input of mana, the skill of holding the clouds was activated. The fine fire patterns on the entire bow lit up, and the glow bloomed on both sides of the bow arms, as if 2 rainbow wings were opened. The strings were released, and the arrows came out. Bah! Different from the soft whistling sound of ordinary arrows flying out, this arrow is like a bird's song after being shot. The arrow turns into a beam of red light and flies out, with a red glow on both sides, like the wings of a red bird. Boom! A pillar of fire rose in front of Su Yu, and the symbiote turned directly into a charred object in the pillar of fire. He died before he even had time to scream, which was considered a relief. The hunter has cleared offender No. 14,673, and the hunting mission has been completed. It's very powerful, but a little too flashy. I have to find a way to cover it up later. Glancing at the charcoal on the ground, Su Yu retracted his long bow and looked at the shadowy and majestic building in the distance. That was the capital of the human empire, the sacred paradise. After wandering around the outer suburbs for so long, it was time to go and see this famous city. Saw it. Just as he was about to set off, Su Yu paused and turned to look at the forest behind him. There was a signal from the fire bead. Was it Kairos? He gave away 3 fire orbs in total. Barna had already arrived in the holy heaven, and Bunir was probably still a long way away from the empire. It was only half a day before Su Yu, Bunir, and the others separated. With the speed of the war horses, it would take at least 2 days for Bunir and the others to reach the holy heaven. Therefore, the fire orb that appeared behind could only be the one from Kairos. The knights led by Kairos were the real Knights of Radiance. They charged with lightning speed and were unstoppable. The efficiency of destroying monsters is much faster than that of the cavalry led by Su Yu and Bunir. It is not surprising that they have returned to the imperial capital now. Thinking of this, Su Yu did not hesitate and turned around to go back. Rather than blindly rushing into the unfamiliar imperial capital, it would be better to meet up with Kairos first. He and Kairos have a much deeper relationship than Barna and the others. 20 minutes later, Su Yu followed the fire bead's induction and stopped all the way. After a few steps, he jumped up to the big branch next to him and looked into the distance. A huge cavalry team appeared not far ahead. In the center of the team, dozens or hundreds of large iron cages were lined up, and densely packed monsters were crowded into the iron cages. The outer wall of the iron cage was covered with a faint white light shield, which completely blocked out the roars and roars of the monsters inside the cage. Except for the sound of fine horse hooves, there was no other movement in the entire cavalry. At the front of the cavalry, 2 tall armored war horses led the way. The knight on one of the horses was Kairos, whom Su Yu was familiar with. As for the other person, Su Yu did not recognize him. It was a man with a ray of hair on his head. A middle-aged knight with conspicuous white hair. Although it was night at this time, under the bright moonlight, it did not appear dim. The entire forest seemed to be covered with a layer of silver gauze. By the moonlight, Su Yu's eyes swept across the cavalry one by one. Most of them had faces he was familiar with. They were all his comrades who had rushed out of the beast tide from the Black Mountain fortress. But for the remaining small number of cavalry, he never seen it before. The small group of cavalry is now at the outermost edge of the cavalry, each holding a flag. The flag is constantly fluttering in the wind, emitting a faint red light. All the surrounding beasts that came out to hunt and prey at night, even the magical beasts, ran away whimpering after seeing the red light on the flag, not daring to take any action against the cavalry. This is the Knights of the Guards. When he saw a tiger monster that was nearly 3 meters in size cautiously retreating away after seeing the red light, Su Yu was thoughtful and probably guessed the identity of some strange cavalry. The location he was in now was not at the edge of the dense forest full of ordinary beasts. Instead, he was already close to the boundary deep in the dense forest. There were many monsters active at night, and he had avoided nearly 10 monsters when he arrived. And in this dense forest at night, where dangers abound and monsters gather, the only possibility that can achieve the frightening effect of expelling all beasts with just a few flags is the Knights of the Holy Heaven Guards. The human empire was founded on knights. The first emperor of the empire was the Knight King Cassius. Therefore, knights had a high social status in the empire and were not something ordinary people could become. Among them, the Knights of the Guards can be said to be the strongest fighting force in the imperial capital. They are responsible for guarding the imperial capital. They will completely clear out the outer suburbs of the imperial capital every once in a while. During the clearance process, all monsters that dared to show their fangs to the knights would be slaughtered. Over time, the fear of the Knights of the Guards flag was implanted in the hearts of almost all the monsters in the outer suburbs, to the point that once the flag was exposed, hundreds of monsters would be killed. The extent to which the beast retreats. Only the Knights of the Guards can silently lead this large number of convoys through the suburban forests and arrive at the imperial capital. In addition, any large-scale troops will face after entering the suburban forests. A large number of monsters, one after another. Instead of taking the large-scale galloping road leading directly to the imperial capital, we chose to travel through the suburban forest at night under the protection of the Guards Knights. It seems that this is a secret mission. On the tree trunk, Su Yu touched his chin and looked at the cavalry below, murmuring to himself. After his eyes wandered around the iron cage in the center of the cavalry, the strange weapon that appeared in the sacred place in the original plot suddenly appeared in his mind. Inside the paradise, a group of monsters even blew up the outer wall of the imperial capital, feeling relieved. Let me just say that the majestic human capital was so easily infiltrated by a group of mindless monsters. Was it a deliberate arrangement to force the incompetent and short-sighted king to recognize reality? After running through a few thoughts in his mind, seeing the cavalry in front getting closer and closer, Su Yu no longer hit and jumped directly from the tree. The sound of landing was very light, but the two leaders in front of the cavalry got up at the same time. He reacted and turned to look in Su Yu's direction. Who is where? Kairos shouted, and another knight beside him directly projected the spear in his hand. Facing the glowing spear heading straight for the door, Su Yu waved his halberd. After a spark exploded in the air, the spear flew back, and he slowly walked out of the shadows. Kairos, it's me. Zhenhuo. Chapter 66. In the lush forest, the cavalry team that had been stagnant for a while started to set off again, slowly approaching the direction of the imperial capital. The only change was that the leading cavalry team changed from 2 to 3 cavalry. Zhenhuo, this is the deputy commander of the Knights of the Guards, Cook. Su Yu followed Kairos' instructions and looked at the middle-aged knight on the left, and said politely. Hello, I'm sorry. Cook's eyes stayed on the Fangtian painted halberd held by Su Yu for a while, and then he responded with a mild attitude. I heard Kairos mention your record many times along the way. Your reputation is well-deserved and your strength is very good. Lord Cook, thank you very much. After Kairos saw that the two introduced each other, he turned to Su Yu and asked. Zhenhuo, why are you the only one here, where are Bunir and the others? When I was in Kedra town, I boarded Barna's airship in order to save a young man. By chance, I arrived near the imperial capital first. However, the monsters on the right side of the empire have almost been cleared. Bunir and the others should now also on the way to the holy heaven. Su Yu briefly told his experience. Before Kairos could speak, Cook on the side reacted to Barna's name and frowned slightly. Mercenary King Barna? Xinhuo, can you tell me who else is on the airship? Su Yu nodded. There was nothing to hide in this matter, and Cook would see them soon. Besides Barna, there are also Geraint and his sister Argenta. Geraint the Ranger. These three are all famous figures. It seems that they came to the imperial capital for that matter at this time, but I don't know the specific purpose of coming. The deeds of the three people began to appear in Cook's mind. It can be said that these three people are not simple people. They are also famous in the entire Altria continent. Although their reputations are usually positive, but now at the critical moment of the Black Dragon's recovery, these three people suddenly came to the imperial capital hand in hand. Cook, who was the deputy leader of the Knights of the Guards, couldn't help but feel wary, especially since there was also the Ranger Geraint among the three. This matter must be reported to Captain Biscott immediately. Thinking of this, he immediately turned his attention to Su Yu and spoke solemnly. Xinhuo, it is not a trivial matter for these three people to arrive in the imperial capital together, especially during this period. For the safety of the imperial capital, I must report this matter to the leader of the Guards Knights, Lord Biscott. If possible, I hope you can go with me to meet Lord Biscord. Cook spoke very solemnly, but he did not inform Su Yu in an orderly tone, but to discuss it. Although Cook was nominally the superior of Su Yu and Kairos, the status of the Knights of the Guards was very transcendent and was located in the Empire. Head of Knights. But that is only in name. The real direct superior of the Glow Knights is General Thorn of the Black Mountain Fortress. That guy is not someone to be trifled with. He dares to start a fight directly in front of His Majesty the King at an imperial meeting. Even though many years have passed, Cook still remembers the chaotic scene of flames flying. With a strong background and Su Yu's strength, Cook seemed very polite. After hearing Cook's request, Su Yu glanced at Kairos vaguely, and after seeing him nodding slightly, he responded. Of course there is no problem. I have often heard people mention Lord Biscord's name. It is a blessing to meet him together now. Thank you. Cook was obviously quite satisfied with Su Yu's answer and nodded repeatedly. After dealing with Cook, Su Yu turned his head and glanced at the large number of monsters behind him, looked at Kairos and asked hesitantly. Who are these monsters? Kairos did not respond, but turned his attention to Cook on the left. It was not convenient for him to say this. Noticing Kairos' gaze, Cook understood. After sorting out his thoughts, he spoke softly, keeping his tone within the range that only the three leading men could hear. Xinhuo, how much do you know about the Black Dragon? Not much, I just heard that the Black Dragon is about to revive. Hearing that Su Yu also knew that the Black Dragon was about to revive, Cook looked at Kairos in confusion, and Kairos shook his head slightly. Putting down the surprise in his eyes, Cook did not immediately ask Su Yu where he learned about it, but continued to tell. The Black Dragon was born a long time ago, and its specific origin is unknown. But many years ago, the Black Dragon set off a monster craze with the intention of subverting the entire continent of Altria. Then, under the leadership of the sage Urano, various the tribes formed a coalition, and after paying a heavy price, they successfully wounded the Black Dragon and put it into a deep sleep in the dark valley. But that was just a slumber, not death. Now, as the monster's activities become more and more frequent, it indicates one thing. The Black Dragon's slumber is about to end, and when it wakes up, it will inevitably stir up trouble again. A disaster that affects the entire continent. Whether it is the prophecy from the elves or the warning from the temple, they all indicate that the Black Dragon's recovery is approaching. The Black Mountain Fortress, which is responsible for guarding the monsters, has reported many times that the Black Dragon will awaken. Having said this, Cook paused briefly before speaking again. But His Majesty the King doesn't believe it. Perhaps the peace has lasted for too long, or perhaps His Majesty simply does not want to believe that the Black Dragon Society happened to revive during his reign, so in the face of a battle report from the Black Mountain Fortress, and in the face of frequent messages from the elf side, His Majesty the King chose to ignore all requests for alliance, and when Lord Biscott advised His Majesty only said that these were just scaremongering and nonsense. During the narration, although Cook always addressed the King as His Majesty, his tone was light and calm. However, when he mentioned Biscott, his tone fluctuated, while Kairos, who was listening quietly on the side, remained expressionless throughout. After years of slumber, we have no way of knowing whether the Black Dragon's power has diminished or increased, but what is certain is that after years of conquests, the strength of the human empire is far inferior to what it once was. If your majesty continues to be foolish, stubborn, after the Black Dragon revives, the human empire is likely to be destroyed by the claws of the monster. As a last resort, Lord Biscod had no choice but to come up with a strategy to send these monsters to the imperial capital. After all, the cruelty of the Black Mountain battlefield is too far away from the imperial capital. Perhaps only when His Majesty truly sees the ferocity of these monsters can he wake up and mobilize the Empire will use all its strength to deal with the Black Dragon disaster that may occur next. This is why we quietly transported these monsters. We need to use them to wake up His Majesty the King. After the Black Dragon incident is over, Lord Biscod will also confess the matter to His Majesty, and he will bear all the faults. After saying that, Cook looked at Su Yu with bright eyes. Su Yu was in awe and nodded slowly to indicate that he understood all the reasons. Lord Biscord is really concerned about the country and the people. Throughout Cook's narration, the king was portrayed as a self-willed, ignorant, and cowardly fool, while Biscod was a heroic figure who sacrificed himself for the country. Some of this was true, some of it was false, Su Yu felt of course there are, but he doesn't mind showing his admiration for Biscod. After all, he will need to rely on Biscod's power in the imperial capital. The next time was spent in occasional chats between Cook and Su Yu. Most of the conversations mentioned Biscord's name. It was not difficult to see that the man in front of him was a crazy fan. Kairos, on the other hand, kept his iceberg face and followed him aside. He did not comment or interrupt, and only wanted to be a companion. 40 minutes later, the cavalry successfully arrived at a remote corner outside the imperial capital. After properly placing the monsters, Cook looked at Su Yu. Xinhuo, we don't need to worry about things here. Let's go. I'll take you to meet Lord Biscod first. Kairos, I'm sorry to bother you here. Kairos nodded, secretly gave Su Yu a cautious look, and then went to deal with the monsters, while Su Yu followed Cook deep into the imperial capital. Chapter 67. The Holy Paradise is very large. It is a city built on a mountain peak. At the top of the mountain is the imperial palace, with a series of buildings below it, and at the outermost edge is the vast suburban forest, which tightly wraps the entire imperial capital. Two large tracks at the front and back divide the forest. Cook led Su Yu into the city from the east gate. The imperial city was quiet at night, but under the cold moonlight, one could still see the prosperity of the city through the surrounding scattered houses and flat and wide streets. Different while the buildings in Kedra town are low and sparse, the buildings in the imperial capital are mostly tall and dense. That's the palace. The statues on the left and right sides are crowned by the two angels who are said to protect the goddess, the Angel of Glory and the Angel of Holy. The layout of the entire imperial capital is in the form of a staircase, and the buildings become more luxurious and gorgeous as you go inward, guarding the white pearl at the top like blooming petals. Su Yu rode his warhorse and walked slowly on the main road paved with marble. Listening to Cook explaining various areas of the imperial capital to him, he looked up in the direction instructed by Cook. A magnificent white castle building comes into view. The building is majestic and white. At the outermost end of the building, there are two tall angel statues standing on the left and right. The statues wear high crowns and robes, with wings converged behind them and in front of them, holding a stone scepter as high as the statue. This is the inner city of the imperial capital. The nobles and officials of the empire basically live in the inner city. Lord Biscod's residence is also here. The management of the inner city is obviously much stricter than that of the outer city. After following Cook into the inner city, Su Yu has already seen several waves of guards patrolling the streets. When these guards saw Cook leading the way, they all saluted respectfully and then retreated obediently. It can be seen that Cook's status in the imperial capital is not low. After walking in the inner city for a while, Cook finally took Su Yu to a stop in front of a rather solemn-looking mansion. Compared with the various buildings around it, the mansion was not luxurious and even looked a little cold. Hard and monotonous, but with a strong military style. Cook stepped forward to call the door, and then led by an old housekeeper, the two came to a living room. There was no one else in the hall except a man with loose black hair. He had a strong body and deep features, but there is always a vague and gloomy feeling under the long hair. Lord Biscod, the goods have been shipped to their destination. When Cook saw Biscod sitting on the main seat in the hall, he immediately touched his chest and saluted, and reported the situation. Su Yu did the same thing half a step behind him. Thank you for your hard work, Cook. Sit down. We are not in the military in private, so there is no need to be so formal. After listening to Cook's report, Biscord waved his hand, motioning for the two of them to sit down, and then turned his attention to Su Yu, who was following Cook. Who is this? Although Biscord had a somewhat gloomy temperament, his attitude during conversation was very gentle and casual. After Cook sat down with Su Yu aside, he began to introduce Biscord. This is the firebrand of the Knights of Radiance. He came to the Holy Heaven via Barna's airship not long ago, along with Geraint and Algerda. After hearing Geraint's name, Biscord raised his eyebrows slightly, but quickly calmed down. He looked at Su Yu, who was sitting upright, with a smile at the corner of his mouth. Xinhuo, I saw your name in the battle report sent by General Thorn. Under the purple fire dragon, you can burn thousands of armors with one strike, which is amazing. The rudimentary means are just suitable for the battlefield. Lord Biscord has oversold you. After the two sides exchanged polite words, Biscord stopped talking and started talking about business. Geraint is an old friend of mine, but he hasn't returned to the imperial capital for many years. Are they here this time about the Black Dragon's resurrection? Yes, Geraint has noticed that the Black Dragon has revived recently, so he came to the imperial capital specifically to meet with His Majesty the King to discuss how to deal with the Black Dragon. And according to his description, the Black Dragon's strength is now greater than before it fell asleep. The pressure will only be greater this time. After listening to Su Yu's story, Biscord frowned slightly. The elves in the temple only knew about it a few days ago. Geraint actually knew about it at the same time, and it is also certain that the Black Dragon is now more powerful than in the past. Oh, it seems that my old friend still hides many secrets. Did Geraint say anything special? Yes, he said he knew the Black Dragon's weaknesses. Oh? What a weakness! Black Dragon Beiyu. Su Yu calmly spat out 4 words. This information was not made up by him, but was exactly what he learned from Geraint. It was exchanged to Su Yu when Geraint asked Su Yu about the situation of the monsters in Black Mountain. Intelligence. Geraint thought these things were insignificant and had no intention of hiding them, but for Su Yu, they were the best stepping stone. Black Dragon Beiyu. Biscord muttered the Black Dragon Beiyu in a faint tone. Tell me more specifically. According to Geraint, the Black Dragon Jade is the source of the Black Dragon's power, the foundation of its existence, and its greatest weakness. The life forms of dragons are very special. Their weakness is not the regular heart or brain, but the jade on the chest. It can even be said that every dragon exists attached to the jade on the chest, and there is no hardness in that place. The protection of scales. As long as we target this weakness during the battle and dig out the jade from the Black Dragon's chest, the Black Dragon will collapse. By the way, Geraint emphasized that the power of the Black Dragon Jewel is extremely evil. Anyone who attempts to contaminate it will fall into the abyss of darkness and will never recover. Biscord listened quietly to Su Yu's words, and did not react until he heard Geraint's final warning. Oh, it's this rhetoric again. There is no difference between evil and justice in power. After all, it is just a tool. It can only be decided by people whether it is used for destruction or protection. Geraint is still as naive as ever, but how come he understands the Black Dragon in such detail? As Biscord lowered his head in contemplation, the living room gradually became quiet. After telling the information he knew, Su Yu began to enter a state of looking at his nose and his mind. However, Cook kept talking after Su Yu spoke. Be quiet. After a long time, Biscord, who was deep in thought, finally raised his head, breaking the stagnation in the atmosphere. This information is very useful. The Fire Knight understands the righteousness and the importance, which is very good. Lord Biscord is exaggerating. This is all for the safety of the Empire. After staring into Su Yu's sincere eyes for a moment, Biscord nodded with a smile and did not continue talking about this topic, but instead started chatting. I heard that the Flame Knights suddenly emerged on the battlefield as soon as they arrived at the fortress. After that, they joined the Radiant Knights and were responsible for leading the team to exterminate the monsters in the rear of the Empire. The whole process only took a few days. It is really outstanding. Faced with Biscord's sudden praise, Su Yu acted extremely humble. Mainly because of General Thorn's eclectic approach and the full use of his talents, I am fortunate enough to be valued by Captain Kairos. Moreover, although I have only been a member of the Glow Knights for a few days, Captain Kairos has great trust in me. I will do my best. Try your best and don't dare to slack off. It seems that the Fire Knights and the Glow Knights have a very close relationship. I originally wanted to recruit more talents to the Guards Knights, but now it seems that the hope is slim. Thanks to Lord Biscod for your appreciation, but the Imperial Knights are all headed by the Knights of the Guards. Whether I am in the Knights of Radiance or elsewhere, I am still a member of your command. There is no difference. If you have orders, I will give them. Yes, I should try my best. Chapter 68. In the living room, after Su Yu's firm words fell, Biscod suddenly chuckled. Haha, that's right, but I think it's wrong. Xinhuo, if I remember correctly, you probably haven't had time to use the merits you accumulated in Black Mountain Fortress. In that case, this is my token. With that said, Besk took out a token and handed it to Su Yu, who took it with both hands. You can take it to the military supplies office in the imperial capital to exchange for merit. It can also be regarded as a meeting gift. There are many more items in the imperial capital than inside the Black Mountain Fortress. Please consider it carefully. By the way, Geraint and the others have good character and strength. Now they are all in the imperial capital. They can make more friends, which will be helpful in the future. You can also come to see me more in the imperial capital in the future. Not only Kairos, I will also help you. I also appreciate it quite a bit. Thank you, sir. After thanking each other, Su Yu and Qulun stood up at the same time. Now that they had finished talking about the business, it was natural not to continue to disturb them. My subordinates left first. Okay, it's getting late, go back and rest as soon as possible. There's been a lot of traveling along the way. By the way, remember to settle down everyone in the Fire and Glow Knights. Yes. Biscord waved his hand gently, Cook and Su Yu saluted and left. As the door was closed, the huge living room suddenly became deserted. The smile on the corner of Biscod's mouth slowly calmed down and became neither sad nor happy. His eyes were deep under his long black hair. Is the Black Dragon Bayou a natural evil force? Haha, Geraint, after so many years, you really haven't changed at all. The faint tone spread in the empty living room, as if he was talking to himself, but a moment later, a soft and charming voice suddenly sounded in the living room. Sir, why do you care about what Geraint thinks? Power is just a tool, and tools can only be used easily or not. There is no difference between good and evil. This is not true for a ranger like Geraint who has limited vision. It's understandable that his position is too low. As the words echoed, a cloud of black mist emerged in the living room. The black mist condensed into a graceful female elf. The elf was dressed as an assassin. Her tight-fitting coat well outlined her enchanting and hot figure. She was dressed in they are all black, with no skin exposed, but the long black ears exposed from the hood indicate her identity. She is a dark elf who has disappeared on the mainland for many years. The dark elf's slender fingers gently scratched Biscod's shoulder armor, and then with a firm grip, his waist twisted, and his whole body sat in Biscod's arms, and his fingers slowly rubbed Biscod's strong flesh. Chest, the soft voice sounded again. Only you, my lord, only you are worthy of possessing this supreme treasure, and can you truly master the incredible power of the Black Dragon Jade? According to your will, use it to be righteous, and use it to be evil. You will become Alt. The sole ruler of the continent of Asia will completely bring them a bright and peaceful new future. The warm and fragrant Nephrite was in his arms, and the alluring temptation was at his side, but Biscod's eyes were still calm, looking coldly at the extremely charming dark elf in his arms, unmoved. Geraint seems to know as much as you do. Ranger Geraint is indeed a troublesome person. I don't know the source of his information, but his influence is not big. He is honest enough. This is his weakness. He will become a good chess piece in our dragon-slaying plan. For the building blocks of our great empire, but the fuel. When it came to fire, Biscod's eyes narrowed slightly. Have you known him before? I saw it when I was at Black Mountain Fortress. The fire dragon's strike on the battlefield was really impressive, but his appearance was too coincidental. He was unknown before, but he suddenly emerged when the Black Dragon was about to wake up. You must let him becoming a member of the dragon-slaying group? I'm not sure whether he can be trusted. Although his face was invisible, the elf's worry could be heard in his tone. Believable. Biscord sneered. Which of the dragon-slaying groups to be formed does not have its own agenda, and who can be called trustworthy? Elves? Empires? Temples? Mages? Mercenaries? Which one does not have its own master, and which one does not covet the power of the black dragon? He doesn't need to be trustworthy, he just needs to have the right strength and be smart enough. I don't mind if he makes the situation more confusing, as long as the water is turbid enough, no fish will notice the trapped nets. Sir, you will definitely be the ultimate winner. In the darkness, there was a faint red light in Biscord's eyes. In the early morning, as the golden sun rises in the sky, the bells of the sleeping temple also ring simultaneously. The melodious ringing of bells spread throughout the holy heaven, and also woke up the city from silence. The sounds of footsteps, carriages and horses, prayers, talking and laughter, and noise began to spread in every corner of the city, especially the imperial capital. The outer city suddenly became lively. In a street in the outer city, Su Yuejin was walking leisurely in the city, holding an apple in his hand for breakfast. The imperial capital during the day was much more vivid than what he saw at night. After wandering around, he saw he preferred the vibrant outer city in front of him to the boring inner city. Compared with the real ancient Western cities in history, the holy paradise is undoubtedly much better. The marble-paved streets are clean and tidy. Not to mention filth, even ordinary garbage is not very common. Although the pedestrians coming and going are not well dressed. But at least it can be said that they are all well dressed, not unkempt, and there is little smell in the air. Most of the houses in the city have red tiles and white walls, and the most common reliefs and statues of the goddess can be seen everywhere. This is a typical city that combines politics and religion. The belief in the goddess covers almost everyone in the city. The tallest building in the outer city is the solemn sleeping temple on the east side. After 3 hours of wandering around, he already had a clearer impression of this human empire. Because of the existence of magic and extraordinary power, apart from the absence of electrical appliances, the rest of the planning and management of the Holy Paradise are very close to modern times. Urban. After meeting with Biscod yesterday, Su Yu, arranged by Cook, lived in a luxurious mansion in the outer city. The room where Kairos lived was also nearby. Cook also left a room before leaving. The small bag of gold coins can be said to be quite considerate. After greeting Kairos in the morning, he began to wander around various areas of the imperial capital. In addition to tasks, there are also various colorful natural landscapes and unique civilization features in the derived world. In his spare time while performing tasks, he doesn't mind having some fun and experience. In a high-end hotel in the outer city, Su Yu put down the knife and fork in his hand, drank the green fruit wine in one gulp, and couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. The food in this world also has a unique flavor. The steak made from Warcraft meat is tender and juicy, and the fruit wine said to be from the elf forest is refreshing and delicious. You will feel warm and comfortable after eating, but the price is a bit high. But you get what you pay for. Su Yu, who just got a bag of gold coins from Cook, didn't care much about the consumption. After paying the bill, since he had eaten and drank enough, it was time to get active. Biscord's hint last night was very obvious, asking Su Yu to deliberately make friends with Geraint and the others in the imperial capital. If he has special information or needs his help, he can go to his mansion at any time to find him. Su Yu is not opposed to this matter. Whether it is to complete the main mission or to get more benefits from Biscord, it is necessary to make good friends with the protagonist. I closed my eyes and sensed the location of the fire orb. The one located in the inner city should be Kairos. He started practicing his gun in the courtyard early in the morning. He has never left the house until now. The other fire orb located nearby is Baal. Accept them. After estimating the distance, he found that it was also in the outer city and not far away. He could arrive there within 10 minutes. Su Yu walked out of the hotel and set off to the west. He also counted on Barna to introduce him to the skilled dwarf blacksmith. Chapter 69. Look at him carefully. Such a warrior will not be afraid even when facing a black dragon, even if he is holding a discounted sword that only sells for 1 gold coin. In the West City business district of the outer city, in front of a small iron shop, Barna was holding Lambert in his arms and speaking impassionedly, boasting and praising Lambert as if it was free of charge. He couldn't help but fold his arms, head held high, and his face was full of pride. His expression froze until he heard Barna's unexpected gold coin at the end. Barna didn't pay attention to Lambert's expression below him. After praising him, he immediately changed his tone and asked the dwarf blacksmith in the shop. A 50-cent sword, something like that. Faced with Barna's sudden change of tone, the dwarf seemed particularly calm. He had known Barna for so long, and he knew his character very well. The rhythm of tapping the sword embryo in his hand did not change at all, and he spoke calmly. I only make the best. For 3 gold coins, I will give you a good sword. Hey, make it cheaper. Looking at the 2 fawning smiling faces of Barna and Lambert in front of him, the dwarf had no intention of letting go. No, it's only 3 yuan. The sword hilt needs another 7 yuan. Barna counted the seconds with his fingers, became furious, stepped forward and asked. What? Isn't this still 10 yuan, you profiteer? Oh, forget it, it seems like this deal can't be done today. After failing to negotiate the price and losing interest, Barna waved his hand and planned to leave. The dwarf didn't react at all, but Lambert immediately became anxious. Hey, this won't work. I defeated you. You have to buy it. After the words fell, Barna clenched his fists in anger, and the dwarf on the opposite side also calmly opened his mouth and said some finishing touches. The majestic mercenary King Barna was defeated by a child and acted like a fool. You're cheating? It's obviously him who's cheating, you little brat. Barna retorted angrily at the dwarf, and then felt a little out of breath, so he put his big hand on Lambert's chest and pushed him back. With Lambert's weight, it was obvious that he could not resist Barna's strength. His center of gravity was unstable, and he retreated uncomfortably. When he was about to fall to the ground, his arms that were swinging wildly grabbed the wrist of a passerby beside him in panic. The passerby was covered tightly by a grey hooded coat and his face could not be seen clearly. After Lambert grabbed his wrist, the passerby flicked his hand, and Lambert, who was about to fall to the ground, was pulled back to his feet, and the passerby's wrist was freed from the grip. But Lambert, who had just stood up, was unable to stand firm due to several consecutive pulls. After shaking twice, he was about to fall again. In a panic, he grabbed the corners of the grey hood. As Lambert's body fell, the hooded coat was torn off, revealing the figure under the hood, a female elf with a cute face. Her long golden hair was tied into a ponytail, and the Alexandrite headdress she wore on her forehead shone in the sunlight, making the girl's pink and jade face look even more delicate. The hood left the body, and the elf was startled. He quickly reached out and grabbed the front of the hood, and also grabbed Lambert, who was about to fall to the ground. No one on either side had any intention of letting go. As a result, the hood coat was violently lifted up and down, gradually tightened under the pull. Then with a sudden rebound, the elf took back the hood, and Lambert was pulled forward by the elasticity of the hood. By chance, he came into close contact. The air became quiet at this moment, and the passers-by were all stunned at the coincidental scene in front of them, especially the man among them, who looked at Lambert with eyes filled with envy. Tisk! It really is the protagonist's luck. On the periphery of the crowd, Su Yu was also a member of the onlookers. When Barna and Lambert were bargaining in front of the iron shop, Su Yu was nearby, but he did not come forward immediately, but waited aside. What is happening is the bloody scene in front of the male and female protagonists when they first met. Snapped! A loud slap came from the front. The sound came from the collision between the elf's palm and Lambert's cheek. After giving the little gangster in front of her a hard slap, the elf girl snorted coldly. She glanced around and found a few meters away. The crowd was attracted by the movement here, and they were looking at the elves on the street whispering in amazement. Since the hostility between the human empire and the elf kingdom, there has been no trace of elves in the holy paradise for decades. It is hard to say for the nobles in the inner city. At least these ordinary people have seen this legendary species for the first time. Noticing the gazes of the people around him, the elf didn't waste any time, looked for a direction where the crowd was thinner, and ran away. On the other side, Lambert, who had actually received a slap from the elf, fell to the ground with an ouch. After being helped up by Barna, he was gritting his teeth as he watched the elf in the crowd gradually run away. Damn it, she has to apologize to me. You can pull him down. Besides, you won't suffer any loss. Ignoring Barna's teasing, Lambert broke away from Barna's arm, whistled on the street, summoned the 2 puppies that had been with him since the town of Kedra, and then raised his hand. The elf ran in the direction and said energetically, "Chase me." Behind him, Barna looked at the man and 2 dogs running away with doubts in his eyes. Strange, why do elves come to the holy heaven? It should be the same as the reason why you came to the holy heaven. It's all for that thing. A familiar voice sounded from his ears. Barna turned his head, and a black cloak came into view. Zinhuo, haha, you finally found me. Not seeing you for one day is like 3 autumns. Don't worry, I haven't completed the bet I promised you, and I won't run away. Barna was not embarrassed when his thoughts were revealed. He laughed boldly and waved his hands. No way, no way. Don't you worry about this. It's not safe in the outer suburbs. Have you handled the matter? Su Yu nodded, then looked past Barna in front of him and looked at the dwarf blacksmith behind him. The man was grabbing a large handful of crystal fragments from the bag and throwing them on a red-hot sword embryo. Various colors of light began to appear on the sword embryo. This is a truly extraordinary forging skill, rather than Su Yu's crude method of simply relying on fire and forging materials. Barna, is this the forging master you mentioned to me? Master? When did I say that? Barna scratched his head, but didn't think much about it. Seeing that Su Yu was so interested in the dwarf, he pulled Su Yu towards the shop and reminded him in a low voice. This old guy does have a few brushes in his hands, but he just wants money. If you want to learn from him, you have to be prepared to bleed a lot. On a street outside the blacksmith shop, two contractors, one fat and one strong, looked at Su Yu and Barna standing side by side in the distance, their faces a little ugly, and the fat man spoke first. What should we do? Should we come forward to talk? The tall and strong man at the head took a deep look at the blacksmith shop in the distance, and complained angrily. Damn, why is it this guy again? Forget it, we two small bodies shouldn't come together to kill him, retreat. After that, he no longer hesitated, turned around and left, and the fat man behind him hurriedly followed. Anyway, we can't get that thing without Barna's introduction. Let's just wait until the dragon-slaying group leaves the imperial capital and kill the dwarf directly. He must have a lot of good things, and maybe he can also reveal a scroll of knowledge. I don't know what's going on with sister. Have you found the group of monsters that invaded the imperial capital in advance? Don't fetch water from both ends. Chapter 70. Don't run. The outer city of the imperial capital seemed particularly lively today. Lambert and his two puppies were chasing the elf in front of him on the streets and on the roofs. They were jumping all over the place, but with the elf's flexible movement, he could only those who were teased repeatedly hit the wall. After another clang of bells, Lambert rolled out of a two-story building holding an iron pot on his head. He had fallen directly from the roof of the building just now. When he ran to, I didn't know how many rooms I had broken into when I went downstairs. You little gangster, stop here. A woman's angry scolding came from behind. Lambert, who was carrying an iron pot on his head and a suspicious hood hanging on his chest on the street, was frightened. He ran away faster and did not dare to stop at all. In a panic, he ran for who knows how long. When the panting Lambert stopped, he had already unknowingly ran to the outer city wall of the imperial capital. After taking a few deep breaths against a big tree, Lambert only then did realize that there was a pink thing on his chest that he had never seen before. Twisting the straps of the thing with his fingers, Lambert looked disgusted. What is this? This is the most popular style this year, and it suits you very well. The elf girl's teasing voice came from the tree. Lambert was so angry that he threw away the tie in his hand. He looked at the elf above his head and jumped away again and shouted. I won't let you get away. In front of Lambert and the others was a half-built construction site beside the city wall. High and low tents and scaffoldings were neatly arranged, and various construction tools were piled randomly around. The elf used his strength to jump on the branches and jumped high into the sky. He jumped up and landed on the shoulders of a tall angel statue in front of the construction site. Lambert looked around below and found no suitable tools. He simply took off the iron pot above his head and threw it towards the elf's position with the intention of knocking it down. The elf on the sculpture calmly looked at the iron pot coming from below, and did not dodge. Instead, he jumped up, and then stepped lightly on the flying iron pot in the air. The iron pot was kicked back, and the elf he also used this to jump back, his whole posture elegant and calm, like a flying feather. After using the strength to jump away, she grabbed a wooden pole on the scaffolding and performed a standard gymnastic rotation. After jumping, her body landed on the highest point of the scaffolding, with the top of the outer city wall above her head. The elf looked down, but did not see the figure of the little hooligan below. The corner of his mouth was slightly raised, showing a playful smile, and then he jumped slightly and climbed onto the wall with his hands. Just when he was about to exert his strength, his body sank heavily. Ahaha, hey, are you looking for me? Slightly arrogant words came from underneath him. The elf lowered his eyes and saw that it was indeed the little gangster. Now Lambert was holding the elf's ankle with one hand, floating and swinging in the air, He finally caught the elf, which made him very proud. He looked up at the elf above and started teasing him. As he spoke, Lambert's expression suddenly froze and his mouth opened slightly. The elf was wearing a light green short skirt. From this angle, he could see some things he shouldn't have seen. Seeing the change in the little gangster's expression, the elf suddenly realized how bad their posture was now. A hint of embarrassment appeared on his cheeks, and when he realized that he was exposed, the elf began to kick Lambert's face hard with his feet. Hey, don't kick me in the face. After being hit several times, Lambert not only did not let go, but tightened his grip. He put his feet on the wall in front of him to use force, then grabbed the elf's ankles with both hands and pulled hard. Suddenly, one person and one elf fell from the air at the same time, and the wooden boards and tarpaulins beneath them were torn apart. A few seconds later, the two fell heavily to the ground, throwing up a cloud of smoke and dust. Fortunately, after being buffered by the tarp several times, the damage they suffered from falling was much lessened. In addition, these two were not ordinary people, so after falling from such a high position, they only suffered a little flesh damage. Bitterness is no big deal. But this huge noise also attracted the attention of workers near the construction site, and they gradually gathered around. These workers all wrapped themselves tightly in clothes, but looking through the white turbans, one could vaguely see that what was covered under the turbans was by no means a normal human face, but an ugly dog-like face. They're all little monsters disguised as construction workers. Outside the construction site, more than a dozen knights in plain clothes looked at the chaotic scene at the construction site, with the corners of their mouths twitching slightly. It's not over yet. Why is this remote corner so busy today? This is the second time. Captain, what should I do? Do you want to intervene? It's not yet the agreed launch time, and are these two accomplices of the previous group? Listening to the inquiries from his subordinates at the rear, Mondel frowned slightly and looked at the chaotic construction site ahead. It can't be the same group. The ones before were obviously looking for something intentionally, but now these two should have barged in accidentally. And there is actually an elf among them. Is he from His Highness? While he was thinking, a tall figure appeared in his mind. Now he only felt that his head was throbbing. If it was really that person, he must be more cautious. The plan this time cannot be exposed. The man in front of him, the elves, had better be safe and sound. Jim, please go and inform Mr. Cook quickly. The planned time should be advanced. Yes. After receiving the order, a young knight wearing ordinary civilian clothes quietly left from behind. Osmond, you have no problem controlling the monsters. Behind him, a priest in a robe stepped forward, his eyes were all white, with no pupils visible. No problem. Okay, pay attention to the situation and control the monster to detonate the bomb immediately if necessary. The city wall must be blown up. Yes. Also, have the team members who went to track the first group of intruders come back. Well, no news has been sent back yet. The subordinate's hesitant reply made Mondel's eyes flash with uneasiness. The purpose of the first batch was so strong that he had an intuition that his plan had been leaked. Gavin, please bring a few more people over. The first group of intruders must not be let go. They seem to know something. The rest of the people are all hiding, and pay attention to the surroundings. Yes. Orders are being issued in full swing here, and the construction site has begun to become lively. In a tent under the scaffolding, Lambert and Elf both climbed up from the ground. A huge hole above the tent accused them of falling from the sky and destroying public property. Lambert's position happened to be at the opening of the tent. He looked at the workers gradually surrounding him with a solemn expression. It looks like the workers are looking for trouble, but wait, they're not workers. It's a black dragon monster. The elf's cold tone came from behind, and Lambert turned his head to look, and was immediately startled. They can't all be bombs. Behind the tent, close to the city wall, there was a huge pile of bombs built into a hill. After looking around at the surrounding monsters, Lambert rolled his eyes and suddenly took a few steps forward, walked up to the monsters and gave them a smile. Hey, brothers, I caught an elf, isn't it awesome? She's right there. While speaking, while all the monsters were attracted by the elves, he moved several times and ran outside the circle surrounded by the monsters. The elves in the circle looked at Lambert, who was still smiling in front of him, flicked the prop in his hand, and suddenly appeared. An exquisite long bow, and then said coldly to Lambert. You human. Chapter 71. On the construction site, 7 or 8 little monsters were grinning and surrounding an elf girl holding a long bow, slowly approaching. Outside the encirclement, there is a cunning human boy. Lambert looked at the monster in front of him without paying attention, quietly picked up the bricks on the ground, and slapped the monster in front of him on the back of the head. After a muffled sound, the monster fell to the ground. Picking up the dagger that fell on the ground, Lambert looked at the monsters in front of him that turned to surround him. His eyes were cold, the elf was at best somewhat conflicted, these monsters were mortal enemies, and he was very interested in killing monsters. While waving the short sword, he was about to step forward to fight, but suddenly there were several roars in the air. The surrounding monsters fell to the ground one after another, with an arrow stuck straight in their heads. It was the elf who took action. You! Lambert, who had not caught any heads, looked angrily at the elf behind him. The elf stood up with a smile on his waist, raised his small chin slightly, and signaled to Lambert that there was a monster left behind him. Go ahead! Lambert turned around, shouted and rushed towards the monster in front with his knife, but before he could get close, another whistle sounded in his ears, and the arrow passed by him, killing the monster before he could take action. Hey, you're kidding me! During the questioning, Lambert held the arrow tail with his left hand and prepared to pull out the long arrow stuck in the monster's head. However, under the sudden force, the arrow did not move at all. He simply inserted the short knife into the ground and held the arrow body with both hands. I exerted all my strength, but the arrow seemed to be growing on the ground, making no movement. Suddenly, the arrow on the ground seemed to come alive and flew out of the monster's head. Lambert's arm was also dragged along with it. He was almost carried away by the arrow. He let go in a hurry. After the arrow escaped from his control, he turned and fell. It was floating in front of him out of thin air. The arrow moved closer, and the tip of the arrow emitting cold light frightened Lambert back again and again. This! You've never seen an elf arrow before, brat, no one can pull it out except me. The elf's charming voice came, and she stretched out her hand, and the arrows on the ground flew up one after another, flying back to her hand like a swallow flying into the forest. This is a unique skill of the elves, and the skill of bow and arrow is already in their hands. Superb! I finally understand why elves are so annoying. You think too highly of yourselves. Annoying people? It's obviously you who has been provoking me. While the two were arguing, the scaffolding behind them collapsed, revealing densely packed monsters on the scaffolding. There were also many monsters on the ground surrounding them, surrounding the two of them. The siege began, with the bowstring in the elf's hand and the dagger in front of Lambert's body. With the cooperation of each other, 7 or 8 monsters had been eliminated, but the number of monsters coming under siege was increasing, and there was no sign of decrease. During the stalemate, a red light shot from outside the encirclement. A monster immediately ignited violent flames under the red light. When it landed, it had turned into a charred corpse with a metal arrow stuck in its head. Out of fear of the flames, the surrounding monsters began to move away from the scorched corpse on the ground, and looked around vigilantly. Lambert looked at the metal arrow inserted into the scorched corpse, swallowed his saliva, and shot an arrow. Burning the monster into a charred corpse was a bit too scary. He turned his head and looked at the elf beside him. Are these your elf's arrows too? No, it's human. The elf didn't pay attention to the charred corpse beside her. She was staring at the direction of the arrow with a solemn gaze. Lambert followed the elf's line of sight and saw a black figure standing upright on the roof in the distance, with a flame in his hand. The long bow bloomed, and beams of red light shot out. The red light fell to the ground, splashing fire among the monsters, and the entire construction site was filled with heat waves. Fortunately, the monsters were located closer to the front and did not affect the bomb hill at the city wall. It's brothers in Huo. As soon as Lambert finished speaking, the battle situation changed again. The blonde-haired Geraint walked into the battlefield calmly. In a flash, his majestic telekinesis lifted more than a dozen monsters into the air. There was a crisp sound of broken bones, and when he landed on the ground, there were already corpses on the ground. Then Geraint pulled out the long sword on his body. The long sword swept across, and a golden wave swept across the entire construction site. The golden light spread and all the monsters were thrown away. Then a phantom appeared in the air, it was Algerta. She was holding a pair of daggers and drew a bright silver arc in the air. Then blood was splashed, and Algerta landed on the ground, surrounded by corpses with their necks slashed. In just a few breaths, the busy construction site fell silent. The elf looked a little dull, but Lambert had already ran forward and started to say hello cordially. Sister Ta, Brother Geraint. While everyone was relaxing for a while, they didn't notice that a little monster hidden in the tent had quietly ignited the pile of bombs in the corner. Long live the Black Dragon! Accompanied by the hoarse roar of the monsters, violent explosions resounded through half of the imperial capital. The city wall collapsed, and a large number of monsters poured in from the gaps in the collapsed city wall like a tide. Compared with the few hundred small monsters in the original plot, perhaps due to the influence of Su Yu's appearance, there are at least thousands of monsters attacking this time. The crowded monster tide even squeezed open the gap in the city wall. The dense monsters opened their sharp fangs and rushed out, forming a large black tide that spread out. All they could think about now was their crazy appetite. How come there are so many monsters in the imperial capital? Geraint looked at the tide of monsters spread out in front of him with an ugly expression. These monsters did not pose much of a threat to them, but there were too many of them, and behind them was the densely populated residential area of the outer city. Arjita, you are responsible for the left side, I. Before Geraint could finish his command, he was interrupted by a Fang Tian painted halberd falling from the sky. Fang Tian's painted halberd carried the airwave and smashed down in the center of the demonic tide. The gravel and flesh splashed, and the demonic tide surged. The trend was suddenly stopped. At the forefront of the demonic tide, a huge ravine suddenly appeared, filled with minced meat. Su Yu stood in front of the ravine, a little blood dripping from the halberd in his hand to the ground. In front of him was the demonic tide that began to surge again, and his voice was smooth. Geraint, I'm in charge of the front. Good. Geraint looked at the blood mist spreading in front of him. This was the first time he saw Su Yu slaughtering monsters. The fighting method was indeed similar to what he expected. It was bloody and cruel. Fang Tian's painted halberd, which was 2 feet long, swept across the room, killing almost everyone within a 3-meter radius. It will soon become a sea of blood, and monsters will break into pieces if they enter. After the frontal demon tide was suppressed by Su Yu, the number of demons flowing from both sides began to increase. Seeing this, Geraint didn't waste any time, responded to Su Yu and ran to the right. Behind the 3 of them, the elf girl felt a little uncomfortable looking at the blood-splattered scene in front of her. She had also experienced war, so she was naturally not squeamish, but Su Yu's fighting method of sweeping the halberd and turning the enemies into minced limbs was very realistic. It is extremely inconsistent with the nature of the elves. On the other hand, Lambert watched with gusto, his eyes full of admiration, and he wanted to step forward to help, but Su Yu was obviously not something he could get close to. He probably would have become a ball of rotten flesh with the monster before he even got close. With that scene in his mind, Lambert couldn't help but trembled. After shaking his head, he gently pushed the elf next to him. Stop watching the show and help me. You can help me. Humph, you don't need to tell me. After being pushed by Lambert, the elf recovered from his stupor. After glaring at the little gangster, he took an arrow and ran towards the area on the left where Aljita was responsible. More than 10 breaths later, the wave of monsters was still blocked by a few people in the construction site, unable to advance even an inch. Around the battlefield, the thunderous sound of horse hooves gradually became louder. Less than a minute before the explosion, the knights of the guards arrived on the battlefield, and Biscord's cold voice spread across the battlefield. Leave no one behind. Chapter 72. In the outer city of the imperial capital, in a remote alley away from the construction site, the sound of rapid running came from the entrance of the alley. The sound of running gradually approached, and 3 contractors filed in from the alley. The leader was a tall woman. After running into the alley, her eyes quickly scanned the layout of the entire alley, and she quickly made a calculation in her mind. Keep moving, he ordered. No, running like this is not an option. Those guys behind are more familiar with the terrain than we are, and they can't get rid of them. This place is in a good location, Zioxiu, quickly find a favorable terrain, and we'll eat those guys at the back here. Okay, big sister. After a girl with wheat-colored skin behind him responded, she whistled softly, and a falcon took off from the alley. After flying to a high place, it began to circle above the alley. Sister, we found it, turn right ahead. The 3 of them quickly ran into the corner of the alley and disappeared. A moment later, several more people appeared at the alley. They were all dressed in ordinary civilian clothes, but they were all tall, holding knives and guns in their hands. It was obvious at a glance that they were not ordinary civilians. These were disguised members of the Knights of the Guards. Several people stopped at the entrance of the alley, but did not blindly run into the alley. The environment in the alley is complicated and the road is narrow. Be careful after entering. These 3 people ran here deliberately. They must have planned it. To be on the safe side, go back and inform Chief Mondel of our location. The rest of you follow me into the alley and pay more attention. At the entrance of the alley, after the leader of the team, Matthew Knight, gave an order, 1 person evacuated, and the remaining people poured into the alley and continued to follow. One of the men took out a short staff from his arms. After shaking it a few times, a thin white line appeared in the air. The thin line extended in the direction in which the 3 contractors had escaped. Follow us, these 3 people must not let go. A few minutes later, several members of the Knights rushed all the way. When they reached a narrow alley, Matthew, who was walking at the forefront, suddenly stopped. Something's wrong, back off. Everyone obeyed the order and retreated. As soon as they took 2 steps back, a violent fire exploded not far in front of them. The flames and impact hit everyone, but they were cut by Matthew's spear. After splitting the fire wave in front, Matthew looked solemnly at the several rockets flying from above. Although the style of these things looked weird, they were probably bombs or something like that. Defense. After giving the order, the 2 priests in the team immediately raised their staffs high, and a light blue energy shield quickly formed, completely surrounding the Knights. Bang! Bang! Continuous explosions were heard above the head, and the boiling flames almost covered the energy shield. Looking out from the inside, one could only see golden red flames everywhere. Every time there was an explosion above the head, the priest holding the staff high groaned, and a trace of blood fell from the corner of his mouth. Finally, the explosion stopped, and the 2 priests just breathed a sigh of relief when 2 sharp earth thorns rose from the ground and penetrated directly from bottom to top through the 2 priests who had just relaxed. The energy shield disappeared, and the sound of explosions resounded among the crowd again, interspersed with the sound of several bullets piercing the air. At the end of the alley, a girl with wheat-colored skin put back the emptied rocket launcher on her shoulder and looked at the thick smoke and fire that had not dissipated in the middle of the alley ahead, showing disdain. I thought it was so strong, that's all. I knew I wouldn't have run for so long. When the tall woman squatting next to her heard this, she moved her palms away from the ground and stood up from the ground. She also looked forward, but her face remained calm. Don't be careless. This group of people is not easy to deal with. We just caught them by surprise. We used gunfire to deal with the leader first. Clear. The reply came from high up on the left. On the roof on the left, a man was lying on the ground with a large, ferocious-looking sniper rifle in front of him. The muzzle of the gun was pointed at the direction of the Knights. Seeing that the smoke and dust below were beginning to subside, the man gently pulled the trigger. The sniper rifle shook. In the strong flames erupting from the muzzle, the golden armor-piercing bullet broke through the airflow at a speed of nearly 1,500 meters per second. Fly downwards. When the harsh sound of metal came from the alley, and the sniper bullet was shot by a long gun into metal shards all over the sky. In the thick black smoke, a pair of eyes emitting rich white light opened, and the eyes suddenly moved up and looked towards sniper position on the roof. The gunfire met those eyes through the scope, and a chill suddenly rose in my heart. Just as I was about to continue shooting, I saw a long gun full of glow tearing through the smoke and shooting towards the roof from below. A fatal sense of crisis spread throughout the body. He didn't even have time to put away the sniper rifle in front of him because of the gunfire, and it suddenly rolled on the roof. Boom! The long gun hit, causing bricks and stones to fly, and half of the roof collapsed. The sniper rifle disintegrated into powder in the glow, and it was unknown whether he was alive or dead due to the gunfire. Below, the air wave caused by the spear flying out has dispersed all the surrounding smoke, revealing the tragic situation in the alley. 2 priests were pierced by earth thorns and stood upright. The red blood had formed a hole at the roots of the earth thorns. Small puddle. Lying on the ground was a knight whose head was shattered by a sniper rifle. The white and red parts of his head were muddy. Not far away was a corpse with a shrapnel stuck in its neck. There was only one person left alive at the scene, and that was Matthew. His whole body was now emitting a rich white light. After getting rid of the sniper on the roof, his white eyes turned to the 2 women facing each other at the end of the alley. You guys, damn it! The voice seemed to be forcefully squeezed out from between his teeth, and then the white light on his body swelled up. With the spear in his hand as the tip, his whole body turned into an arrow and sprinted towards the 2 people at the end of the alley. I'm afraid you won't make it. Facing the charging Matthew, the wheat-skinned girl grinned and took a few steps forward. As she walked, brown hair began to sprout from every pore of her body. The girl's body began to grow larger, her clothes crumbled, and her sharp claws when stretched out, the muzzle becomes longer. By the time she reached the entrance of the alley, the young girl had transformed into a large brown bear 3 meters tall. Her huge body blocked the entire alley and protected the tall woman behind her. Roar! The brown bear roared angrily, and slapped its 2 bare paws on the left and right towards the charging Matthew. The alley became lively again, with beast roars and roars filling the air. 5 minutes later, calm was restored again, but the entire battlefield was already in a mess, the walls on all sides were incomplete, and the ground was full of pits and broken earth thorns. At the end of the alley, the brown bear has returned to the appearance of a wheat-colored girl. She is now wearing a red sheet, leaning against the wall, holding recovery food in one hand, and devouring it. Her other hand was already limp, and there was a large hole in her shoulder that ran from front to back, which was pierced by Matthew's spear just now. Blood was pouring out of the hole, dyeing the scarlet sheets on her body even more vividly. Compared to the girl who lost one hand, the other tall woman was much better. Except for her complexion being a little pale, there was not even a trace of blood on her body. She took out a potion and handed it to the girl leaning against the wall. "Zioxu, drink this. The healing speed of recovery food is too slow." The girl smiled heartily, then pushed the potion back, took out a roll of bandages from the storage space, and wrapped one hand around her shoulder haphazardly, regardless of the spring light leaking from her body. "It's okay, big sister. It's a minor injury. I'm not one of those little fragile ones. I don't know how long I will stay in this world. I have to save my recovery supplies. However, what should we do next? This time we really lost everything." The eldest sister couldn't help but have a headache after hearing this. When her eyes glanced over Matthew's mangled body on the ground, her face became even more ugly. The paradise prompt that just sounded came to mind again. "Killed the members of the Guards Knights. You killed the priest of the Temple of Sleep. The reputation of the Knights of the Guards is -60, and the current status is hostile. The reputation value of the Sleeping Temple is -50, and the current status is hostile." Chapter 73. I originally wanted to solve the monster invasion incident in advance and use this matter to establish a line with the Empire's senior officials, but now I have ended up like this. The plan failed, but instead he forged grudges with the 2 major forces in the imperial capital, and offended the military and the church. The result of this operation can only be said to be a loss of money. The so-called plot can only be used as a reference in this real world. If you follow it blindly, there may be a bottomless pit waiting ahead. The lesson this time made her unforgettable. The girl leaning against the wall also noticed the emotion on the eldest sister's face, so she pretended to smile casually. "Sister, it's okay. It'll be fine for us, and it's not without gain." Zioxu pointed to 2 green boxes scattered in the alley. "Didn't I gain 2 treasure chests? The holy heaven can't stay here, so we can go to other places." As she spoke, she seemed to remember something and looked up at the half-collapsed roof next to her. Gunfire, hiccup, no sound. After a while, a weak male voice came from above. "Ahem, you can't die for the time being, but it's my green sniper rifle. As long as you don't die, come down quickly and withdraw. The battle between the contractors here is over, and the battlefield invaded by monsters on the other side has also come to an end. After the Guards Knights arrived, all these monsters were killed in less than 10 minutes, and now only some finishing work was left. Except for the Knights of the Guards Knights, everyone else was also idle." 2 friends, Biscord and Geraint, who had not seen each other for many years, began to reminisce about old times, while Argita stayed bored beside her brother. Suyu stood in the center of the battlefield. A large piece of fire ignited on the monster's corpse, then circled and danced around Suyu, and was slowly absorbed by him. Although this absorption method took a long time, it was gentle and had a negative impact on the spirit. The pressure load is relatively small. It's a pity that these fires are basically fueled by small monsters and are of extremely low quality. Even fire-patterned steel cannot be melted. It's useless to use it to strengthen yourself, but it's great to use it to mass-produce low-level equipment. Lambert and the elf girl were not far away from Suyu, looking at the wonderful scene of purple fire in front of them. It has to be said that in terms of appearance alone, Xiaohuo is excellent. It has a flaming appearance but is not scorching. Heat wave can be viewed from a distance or played up close. When he felt his temples begin to swell and ache, Su Yu stopped absorbing the fire and waved his hands to disperse the fire surrounding his body. The flames all over the sky turned into countless purple streams and scattered, dyeing half of the sky at the construction site purple. Everyone was attracted by the movement in the sky. Lambert looked at the grand scene in the sky with his mouth open, and his eyes were filled with 3 big words: I want to learn. The elf girl looked up at the wisps of light hanging down in the air, and her emerald green eyes were dyed a light purple. Arjita raised her arm and brushed the tassel in front of her with her slender fingers. The tassel suddenly dispersed into dots of fluorescent light and disappeared. The afterglow of life. After Biscot's eyes wandered around the sky, he moved to the pile of charred monsters on the battlefield that had been burned by the fire. This is the rumored purple fire that can burn thousands of armors. It's interesting. After Geraint saw Su Yu finished, he took a few steps forward and asked. Zhenhuo, we are now going to the palace to discuss with the king about defeating the dragon. Do you want to come with us? Su Yu recalled the image of the fat head and big ears of the human king in his mind, and his interest in going to the palace diminished a lot, and the king could not jump around for a few days. His rights were almost eclipsed by Biscot, so it didn't make much sense to follow him, so he decisively refused. I won't join in the fun. Just let me know when the results come out. I'm going to the military supplies department to improve my strength as much as possible before attacking the black dragon. After hearing this, Geraint did not force himself and nodded in agreement. Biscot, who was following from the side, also heard Su Yu's arrangement and spoke. You probably don't know the location when you first arrive in the imperial capital. I'll send a knight to take you there. Thank you, Lord Biscord. Su Yu thanked him. He really needed a guide. After that, Biscot, Geraint and others left. Before leaving, Lambert looked at Su Yu reluctantly. He yearned for Su Yu's devastating fighting methods. In addition, after seeing the fire today, his heart became even more intense. Its desire. Su Yu didn't pay much attention to the boy's gaze. He was now looking thoughtfully at the elf girl in the team in front. This girl was the elf princess's personal attendant, Laya. She is also the girlfriend of Destiny protagonist Lambert. As expected of an elf, she is so charming and charming. Are you interested, Mr. Zhenhuo? I can help you find out some information about her. A slightly joking voice came to his ears. It was the night guide left by Biscot. Seeing Su Yu staring at Laya in front of him for a long time, he couldn't help but ask. Su Yu withdrew his gaze. He was not interested in Laya. Compared with people, I am more interested in her secret technique of freely controlling arrows. The secrets of elves, that's a good thing, but it's more difficult to get them than the people who get them. The secrets of the race are always kept secret. Let's see. It's getting late. Let's go to the military supplies department first. Could you please lead the way? You're welcome, this way. After chatting for a few words, the two left the construction site one after another and walked towards the military supplies department. The military supplies are located in a certain area of the outer city. It covers a large area and is guarded by a large number of guards. Compared with the Black Mountain Fortress, the protection here is more than a little tighter. After bidding farewell to the knight who led the way, Su Yu walked to the munitions office alone. This time he came to exchange for a mission item, a mission he received from the dwarf blacksmith. Side mission, Scroll of Knowledge. Difficulty level, LV4. Mission Introduction. Master Berlin is never stingy with knowledge, as long as you have an introduction from an acquaintance and can afford the price. Mission Information. Obtain the Chimera Core, an item from the Imperial Capital Munitions Department, which can be exchanged with the dwarf blacksmith for a scroll of forging knowledge. Task period, 10 calendar days. Mission Reward, Advanced Forging Knowledge Scroll, 4th level scroll. Mission Penalty, none. When Su Yu went to the munitions office to exchange items, the discussion in the palace ended perfectly. When Biscot took out the monster helmet, the human king immediately panicked. He may not care whether the Black Dragon's awakening is true or not, or he may not care about the danger of active monsters to the people of the mainland, but he cannot care about his own safety. Now that the Black Dragon monster has reached the outer city of the imperial capital, will the next step be to directly invade his palace? So he compromised and agreed to form a coalition to attack Montenegro with all the strength of the country and eliminate the monsters and the Black Dragon that was about to awaken. The only condition was that this alliance must go out in his name, in the name of the human king Cassius III. After receiving a satisfactory answer, the meeting ended quickly. The elf princess Nelvin and the Karakihu mage from the Lotus Swamp returned one after another. They needed to gather the troops of elves and mages to gather in the Holy Heaven. And Biscod also returned to the house to handle matters. In this dragon-slaying battle, the Knight Legion of the Human Empire will be the absolute main force on the frontal battlefield. As the leader of the knights across the country, he needs to coordinate all of these. While Biscord was working on documents in the study, Cook walked in with an ugly look from outside the door. Lord Biscord, Matthew is dead. Chapter 74. Suddenly hearing the news of Matthew's death, Biscod's eyes instantly turned cold. Matthew was a squad leader in the Knights. His talent and strength were not weak. More importantly, Matthew was a paladin, a paladin with a deep connection to the Sleeping Temple. His sudden death had a great impact. Biscord threw away the quill that he had accidentally broken off just now and looked at Cook in front of him. What's going on? I remember I didn't even let him out of Holy Heaven. Cook organized his thoughts and recounted the ins and outs of the entire incident in detail. So, those 3 people haven't been caught yet. Biscord's tone was calm, but Cook felt his throat dry involuntarily. We haven't caught them yet, but the entire Holy Paradise has been sealed off. My subordinates guarantee that these 3 people must still be in the Holy Paradise. After hearing Cook's assurance, Biscord didn't react. He closed his eyes slightly, and after thinking for a moment, he suddenly chuckled. Oh, sure enough, when a building is about to collapse, many monsters often appear. Cook, I remember that in the past 10 days, the security of the Holy Heaven seems to have been a lot more chaotic. Cook quickly recalled some recent events and discovered something was wrong. 10 days ago, many powerful outsiders began to pour into the Holy Paradise, causing a lot of trouble in the Imperial capital and the outer forests. Flying dog jumps. But because the Black Dragon is about to awaken, the Knights' focus is shifting to preparations for war, so as long as this group of people doesn't cause big trouble, the Knights don't pay too much attention. Yes, and most of these chaos are caused by some mercenaries or rangers who have recently arrived in the Imperial capital. They were not famous in the past, but their strength and reputation are extremely mismatched. Their methods are all kinds of strange, and their actions are very purposeful. They kill Matthew's 3 also have the same characteristics. The group of people Cook mentioned are basically contractors. As contractors who lick blood at the edge of a knife, they are used to being lawless in the derivative world. Now their actions in the Holy Paradise can be considered restrained, but their wanton behavior is still the same. Surprisingly consistent. As the Guards Knights who control the security of the entire Imperial capital, it used to be okay when they didn't pay attention, but once you pay attention, it is easy to find these abnormal contractors gathered in large numbers. After all, their behavior style is too out of place. Very well, now that you're here, stay here forever. Biscord lowered his eyes to hide the cold murderous intent in his eyes, but he could not hide the biting chill in his voice. Cook, mark all abnormal outsiders, and then seal off the entire Holy Paradise. The elves and mages troops will arrive in the Holy Paradise in 3 days. I don't want there to be any uncertain danger factors in the city by then. It is necessary etiquette to clean the room before guests arrive. The word clean, Biscord said very meaningfully. Yes. Etc. Cook took the order and was about to leave when he was stopped again. The experience of Xinhuo began to appear in Biscod's mind. The same mercenary origin, whose reputation was not prominent in the past, suddenly emerged as a force within 10 days. The purple flame was unheard of before. Let Xinhuo be responsible for the specific cleaning. Let Mondel be Xinhuo's adjutant and lead his troops to follow Xinhuo's command throughout. Cook, you are responsible for the blockade. Yes. In the outer city of the Imperial capital, the military supplies department. The armaments and supplies of the Holy Paradise are indeed extraordinary, far exceeding the reserves of the Black Mountain Fortress, both in terms of quantity and quality, especially the first item on the supply list. Su Yu was greedy when he saw it. Holy airship, large. Place of origin, Dragon Valley, Holy Paradise. Quality, blue. Type, large armed airship. Rating, 70+++. Note, blue items are rated from 31 to 70. Introduction, military armed airship can realize functions such as military reconnaissance, troop transportation, fire coverage, etc. It has a cruising speed of 400 km/h, can carry 150 soldiers, is 80 meters long, and is equipped with a large magic ship. 1 main gun, 12 small plasma cannons, 1 sacred defense cover core, 4 inscription engines. Stock quantity, 1. Price, 80,000 merit points, marquee or above identity certificate. Tip: after taking ownership of the spaceship, you can convert the spaceship into a summon. The Holy Heaven is actually willing to put large airships on the supply list. This is an out-and-out military weapon. Su Yu was simply ecstatic when he saw this thing for the first time. When he took Barna's airship before, it already made him yearn for spaceships. It took him more than 3 days to run from the Black Mountain Fortress to the town of Kedra, while Barna's airship flew from the town of Kedra to the Holy Paradise in only 5 hours, and it was only a small civilian aircraft. The ship is completely incomparable with the large armed airships on the list. But the joy was over. He quickly calmed down after seeing the exchange price below. The merit price was 80,000 points, which was an unimaginable price. Coupled with the identity certificate of marquee or above behind it, this thing was completely reserved for the high-level officials of the Empire. The luxury goods are basically placed here to motivate the lower-level officers. Su Yu currently has a total of 5129 merit points, of which more than 3,000 points were obtained by killing monsters along the way. As for the remaining 2,000 points, they were included in the token that Biscod gave him. And with this token, he can ignore almost all the identity requirements on the list. It must be said that Biscod is a generous person. In fact, 5,000 meritorious service is not a small amount, and high-quality blue weapons can be exchanged for 2 pieces. However, when he saw this armed airship, Su Yu was no longer interested in ordinary weapons. He looked through the material list again. There were many types of airships on it. The cheapest ones were small civilian airships, which cost 10,000 merit points. Looking at the picture introduction, they should be similar to the one in Barna, but they were not something he could consume. Affordable. It seems like we have to find a way to get more benefits from Biscord. He is very interested in this spaceship. He will definitely have no chance of doing it on his own. He has to think of some extra tricks. Your Excellency Xinhuo, have you considered it? The sound of knocking on the table rang in his ears. It was the quartermaster behind the counter. Su Yu was already used to seeing the airship in a trance. For people who came to the quartermaster for the first time, 8 out of 10 people had to deal with it. I was stunned by the picture of the spaceship for a while, but in the end, no one among the 10 people could exchange for any spaceship in the list. Okay, exchange these 2. In the end, Su Yu only exchanged 2 items in the list, a bottle of blue quality attribute boosting potion and the Chimera crystal core. These 2 items alone almost exhausted his merit points. He collected Biscod's token again. This thing was a necessary identity document. Without it, he wouldn't be able to redeem most of the good things on the supply list. This was also the difference between the Imperial Capital and the Black Mountain Fortress, where status was more important. Since the merit points were almost spent, he stopped staying and turned around to walk out the door. He needed to find some way to obtain merit points. He wanted many things on the supply list very much. As soon as he walked out of the gate of the munitions department, a knight in full armor walked quickly towards Su Yu. Under Su Yu's doubtful eyes, the tall knight stopped a few steps in front of him, and then solemnly performed a chest-thumping salute, and the armor on his chest was beaten with a buzzing sound. Mondel of the Guards Knights, following the order of Lord Biscod, brought 69 subordinate knights and 20 priests to report to Chief Xinhuo. Su Yu was stunned for a moment, but he quickly reacted. He stood upright and his eyes were as cold as a knife. What is Lord Biscord's order? Instruct Chief Xinhuo to lead the team to eliminate all dangerous elements in the Holy Paradise. It is better to kill the wrong ones than let them go. Side mission, cleaning. Difficulty level, LV5. Mission introduction, on behalf of the Holy Heaven Military, clear all dangerous factors in the Imperial Capital before the arrival of the coalition forces. Mission information, due to the private actions of some idiots, the Empire's tense nerves due to the resurgence of the Black Dragon were completely stirred up. With the joint approval of the 2 forces, the Knights of the Guards and the Sleeping Temple, the Imperial Capital was closed for 3 days and all those who did not belong to the army were strangled. Contractor of Feng and the Church. Task period, 3 calendar days. Mission reward, based on the number of contractors killed in the end, the minimum mission requirement is 60% of the number of all contractors in the Imperial City. Mission penalty, Imperial military reputation -80. The transition chapter is almost finished. Chapter 75, Night. Under the cool moonlight, the night in the imperial capital was particularly quiet today, and the silence made people feel a little bit hairy. Da-da-da. It wasn't until the sound of horse hooves hitting the street that the silence was broken. And, following the order, the cavalry stopped in front of a building, which was a rather large courtyard. Then 4 priests quickly walked out of the queue. They thrust the short-handled staff into the ground, and a layer of light blue magic shield began to expand around the staff until it covered the entire building, isolating the inside and outside. At the moment the magic circle was formed, the contractors in the building quickly reacted, and a strong murderous intent was rising from the outside. The situation is not right, retreat. Loud shouts rang out from the small courtyard, and then the door of the small courtyard disintegrated into countless pieces of wood. A man wearing heavy armor rushed out first, but as soon as he walked out of the door, a square-shaped painted halberd was carried by the fierce wind pressure. Coming in a rush. When there was a loud sound like a bell, and the heavy armor was torn apart under the halberd. The man flew back at a speed far faster than before, leaving only large dark red bloodstains along the way. In the small courtyard, the other companions watched helplessly as the fattest tank in the team was knocked back again just a second after rushing out of the gate. With just one blow, the protective gear was broken and his life was in danger. The man landed, and another mouthful of blood spurted out into the sky, which also woke up some of his stunned companions next to him. Treat, quickly! The contractor holding the long sword was the first to react and shouted to the only healer in the team, but before he finished speaking, a silver shadow flashed past his eyes. The silver shadow fell to the ground, and a scarlet blood flower exploded on the ground. There was a bright silver short spear in the small courtyard, and the tank's head was shattered into a pool of flesh. Damn it! The longsword contractor turned to look outside the door. Through the broken door, he could clearly see a group of cavalry lined up densely outside the courtyard. The leader was a tall knight wearing a black cloak and holding a Fang Tian painted halberd. The first time he saw the cavalry, he knew it was over. With their patchwork of temporary adventure groups, they were no match for the opposite cavalry. Especially the leading knight. Just looking at that knight from a distance made him feel chilled. He would definitely not be able to withstand any blow from this knight. Surrender, we are willing to hand over our equipment and paradise coins to buy our lives. The longsword contractor decisively dropped his weapon and shouted at his nearby companions. If you can't beat me, don't struggle. The main thing is to save your life. Su Yu outside the door looked coldly at the farce in the yard in front. Even though half of the people on the opposite side had begun to hesitantly put down their weapons, there was still no wave on his face. He was not here to steal wealth, but to kill people. Cast. The faint voice of command was like a biting cold wind, blowing through the entire courtyard, followed by a dense roar, dozens of silver shadows piercing the air, setting off waves of wailing in the courtyard. If you fight hard, if you can't escape, focus your fire and kill the commander first. The person who spoke was the contractor who advocated surrender before. He now only has one arm left. Now a third of the corpses are lying in the small courtyard, and most of the survivors are injured. Their eyes were mixed with the crazy meaning of a trapped beast dying, and they stared at Su Yu in front of them. Since they had no chance to survive, it would not be a loss to take one of them away anyway. Then let's die together. I'll have to hold you back even if I die. Amidst roaring sounds, various skills and artillery fire came first towards Su Yu, followed closely by the contractors with scarlet eyes. The slight sting of the beast's intuition spread all over his body, but Su Yu still stood still. He was not in a single fight now, but in an encirclement and suppression. Royal. Another order was issued, the priest's staff behind him was raised high, and an energy defense shield was unfolded in front of Su Yu, blocking all the incoming long-range attacks. Sparks of different colors bloomed on the defense shield, but it only allowed it fluctuate slightly. The defensive shield dissipated quickly after blocking the first wave of attacks. This was specifically explained by Su Yu before. He mainly wanted to offset the control skills in it. Kill. When the defensive cover emerged, Su Yu and the cavalry behind him were ready. The horses under their crotches were ready to move. The moment they disappeared, the cavalry began to charge amidst the thunderous sound of horse hooves. Roar. The majestic air waves set off by the war cry blew away the thick smoke generated by the explosion in front of them. Also blown away were the close combat contractors who rushed forward to fight Su Yu for their lives. Under the repelling effect of the war cry, before they could get close to Su Yu, they were blown away and smashed against the wall of the small courtyard behind them. When they looked up again, what caught their eyes was an armored war horse charging toward them with sparks spraying from its muzzle, and the Feng Tian painted halberd on the horse carrying hunting wind pressure. Amidst the roar, Su Yu swung the halberd in his hand. Under the extreme power and violent weapon effects, all objects 3 meters in front were smashed. Together with the wall and several contractors on the wall, they were all long-lasting. The halberd swept away. The rebel was wrapped in flesh and blood, and was thrown towards the remote contractors in the small courtyard. When the contractors hurriedly avoided, the fierce cavalry also jumped over the incomplete wall and entered the courtyard. A minute later, the small courtyard returned to calm, and while the fire was boiling, Su Yu picked up the blood-red card on the ground. This was already the 6th card he had obtained. You get the Scarlet card, use it Y/N. Tip: the Scarlet card is obtained after killing the contractor. After using it, it will be randomly selected. Tip: each Scarlet card has 3 chances to draw, and items or equipment will be randomly drawn from the dead contractor's storage space or equipment worn. Tip: the world of Dragon Nest is a semi-peaceful scene. After the contractor dies, there is a 50% chance of dropping a Scarlet card. After putting away the card, Su Yu got on his horse. So far, he had cleared 3 such contractor strongholds. Under the power of the military and the church, these strongholds where the contractors gathered had long been discovered clearly. After all, nor do they have many hidden thoughts. The night was still very long, and he still had a lot to clean. He drove the horse out of the courtyard. The iron hooves of the war horse picked up a few sticky meat strands among the minced meat on the ground, and they were quickly ground into the mud. The cavalry outside the courtyard had rearranged their formation. Su Yu walked to the front of the team, and the evil aura on his body became stronger and stronger. Next place, let's go. The cavalry left, leaving only a dilapidated courtyard behind, but due to the isolation barrier, not much movement was heard. Looking towards the holy heaven from a high place, the entire outer city is wrapped by a huge transparent cover, but it is difficult to observe the existence of the cover in the night. On the streets of the outer city, 3 cavalry teams, 1 large, 2 small, were galloping around. After Su Yu divided Mondel's men, he led most of the cavalry to kill those places where contractors gathered in large numbers. The other 2 small troops were spread out and strangle the loners. On the church tower on the east side of the outer city, a bronze bell engraved with runes was vibrating gently all the time. The imperceptible sound waves covered the entire outer city. This kind of fluctuation would make the civilians in the outer city dream in a sweet dream. Spend this long night. Chapter 76. Give me a blast, haha. I didn't expect anyone would dare to take the initiative to cause trouble for our mechanical mission. Boy below, you are quite smart. If you have the ability, come up. Keep fighting, I want to see how long his broken hood can last. On the west side of the outer city, a metal city wall with a sense of technology stands among a group of medieval buildings with red tiles and white walls. The sense of dissonance is overwhelming. On the city wall, more than a dozen contractors were manipulating the technological weapons in their hands, bombarding the knights below while shouting excitedly. In the fireworks that exploded when the howitzers, heavy machine guns, and sniper cannons were fired, the lights flashed. The electronic eyes with red light are particularly obvious. These contractors all have many traces of mechanical transformation, whether they are mechanical hands or mechanical eyes, but the same thing is that when the various weapons in their hands roared, these people showed a flush of excitement. Color. Under the metal city wall, the knights were suppressed by the opponent's exaggerated firepower and could hardly advance. Although the priests in the team were still struggling to support themselves, the energy shield above everyone had begun to shake. Su Yu looked up at the high wall looming in front of him amid the bursting flames, his face a bit ugly. This was definitely the most troublesome stronghold he had encountered so far. 3 minutes ago, the knights arrived at this stronghold. At that time, the appearance of the stronghold was not much different from the previous ones. The same walled courtyard, the same red tiles and white walls, but when the knights just unfolded the isolation cover, a piercing alarm sounded immediately. Then the whole building began to unfold and deform. Amidst the mechanical grinding sound, the originally ordinary wall flipped over, and pieces of steel plates emerged from the wall and from the ground. A few seconds later, in the confused eyes of the knights, a tall metal city wall suddenly appeared in front of them. Su Yu immediately ordered to throw spears, but after a wave of short spears were thrown, there were only a few dents on the metal wall. That's all, this thing is much harder than imagined. Then miniguns began to appear on the metal walls, and many contractors with various weapons appeared on the city walls. The next moment, long-range bombardments like a hail of bullets fell from below, and lasted continuously for 3 minutes. During these 3 minutes, all members of the knights were firmly pressed under the defensive shield and did not dare to show their heads. Once the energy shield was released, under such firepower coverage, except for a few people such as Su Yu and Mondel, it would be difficult for the rest of the knights to survive. What was originally a good encirclement and suppression battle turned into a siege battle in an instant. This is the terrible thing about the mechanical system contractors joining together. The effect is far more than 1+1 \U003E2. However, although the mechanical system has strong early combat power and versatile methods, but in the later stage, it will be exhausted. Sir Xinhuo, do you want to retreat first and deal with this stronghold later? The priests can't hold on for long. Hearing Mondel's admonishment, Su Yu turned around and saw that the 10 priests in the team were all starting to bleed from the corners of their mouths. Evacuation is indeed the best solution now. Under the condescending bombardment of the opponent, it is difficult for the dozens of knights to even get close to the city wall. However, the idea of retreating flashed in Su Yu's mind for a moment, and was immediately thrown away. His mission this time was to clean up the entire imperial capital, and there were definitely many strange contractors among them. The stronghold in front of us is certainly not a special case. If we retreat now, will we have to keep retreating when we encounter more difficult bones in the future? And it's not that there is no way, it's just a matter of taking some risks. Since the knights as a whole can't rush through, then he can go through alone. Su Yu asked Mondel to whisper a few words and told him his plan. Mondel hesitated for a moment but agreed. Su Yu then took out a large amount of ordinary metal from the space, and then began to summon fire to melt it. After a while, 3 large spears and several heavy shields were successfully cast. The bombing on the battlefield continued, but the formation of the knights had quietly changed. However, under the shield of the defensive cover and the flames caused by the explosion, the contractors above did not notice much abnormality. Finally, after the artillery fire continued for another minute, the knight's defensive shield finally collapsed, and the light blue light shield disappeared, which quickly attracted the attention of the attackers on the city wall. Haha, the turtle's shell is broken, increase the firepower. Quickly, kill them to pieces, my Italian artillery, drag them over here. It was discovered that the defensive cover had disappeared, and the attacks on the city wall became more violent, but no effective casualties were caused. The incoming ammunition was blocked by heavy shields erected side by side. Amidst the clanking sounds of metal knocks and explosions, the heavy shields were durable and fast. It's going down, but resisting it for a minute or two won't be a problem. Shenjiao. There was no need to maintain the defensive shield, and the priests in the team also had their hands free. As the 10 priests shouted in unison, an extremely bright holy light exploded in front of the city wall. The dazzling light turned the entire isolation shield into a vast expanse of white. The enemy is firing hard, be careful and don't stop attacking. The bright light that suddenly bloomed was like a super large flash bomb, and it was still flashing continuously. Everyone on the city wall felt that everything in front of them was incandescent. Except for a few with mechanical eyes, most of the others were in the blink of an eye. Only with the help of the brain can you continue to aim at the target. At this time, the heavy shield wall of the knights below began to quietly open a gap. As Mondel threw it hard, a giant spear filled with holy light shot out. Under the cover of the bright light, the spear pierced the scattered artillery fire and ammunition along the way, and approached the top of the city wall at an extremely fast speed. The enemy's long-range weapon is too late to intercept, so duck. Xinhuo quickly calculated the landing point of the spear, and under the command of the commander, everyone in the mechanical mission evaded. When, under the blessing of the external holy light, the tip of the giant spear penetrated directly into the top of the city wall, but it did not cause any casualties. At this time, the holy light shining under the city wall also disappeared. After a set of combos, except for a spear stuck on the city wall, the entire battle situation remained unchanged. Why is the opening on the opposite side so anticlimactic? What is this thing, a bomb? The contractors looked at the spear in the middle of the crowd and were a little wary. This thing looked like an ordinary spear. The results of the investigation were also the same. There was no other difference except that it was bigger. But the thing the enemy sent up with great fanfare couldn't be that simple. He wanted to attack, but he was afraid of blowing it up. Don't attack randomly, pull this thing out and throw it away. Another voice of command came from the earphones. A bald man with large mechanical arms in both hands stepped forward, extended one of the mechanical arms, and then held the giant spear. Looking at you two being cowards, I'll do it. As soon as the mechanical arm grasped the spear, a slight tremor spread from the spear to the whole body. The bald man exclaimed and was about to let go. No, there is. Boom. But before he could let go of his palm, the spear in front of him exploded with a bang. Countless sharp metal fragments flew in all directions, and the bald head not far away was directly pierced by the fragments. As the metal fragments exploded, boiling purple flames spurted out from the spear. The inside of the spear seemed to be filled with this strange flame. When the outer shell exploded, it was like a dam bursting, and the flames were like a torrent. It spurted out and enveloped all the contractors on the city wall. Flame, run! Wait, don't panic, this thing doesn't seem to be warm. Everyone was in a panic at first, but soon calmed down, but the speed of moving away from it still did not stop. Although this thing did not feel the hot temperature, it was certainly not a harmless thing. But as soon as everyone ran a few steps and before they could escape from the fire, they noticed something strange and screams of surprise rang out. My leg shorted out, the metal broke, this thing melts metal. Gan, my eyes, get out quickly. In the chaos, everyone fled the fire scene in embarrassment. Many people had to crawl out with their hands because their mechanical legs were damaged. In just 10 seconds in the fire, all the mechanical components on their bodies were damaged to varying degrees, all the metals that were not strong enough were melted, and many of the metal weapons in their hands also malfunctioned. Someone asked me to come up before, right? Here I am. While everyone was looking at the raging flames in front of them in horror, a cold voice sounded in the center of the fire field. Chapter 79. On the city wall, the boiling purple sea of fire began to gradually shrink under the eyes of everyone in the mechanical envoy. In the end, all the flames condensed into a blazing fireball, suspended above Suyu's broad palm. Along the way, a piece of metal city wall that had been dissolved and devastated was revealed, and a tall figure holding a Fangtian painted halberd appeared in the center of the city wall from unknown time. Suyu pinched it gently with his left hand to extinguish the fire on his palm. Use this thing a little less, don't waste it. Then he glanced at the embarrassed contractors on the left and right, and the corners of his mouth slowly cracked. You guys were very excited about the fight just now. Quick! Attack quickly! He must die, at any cost. The commander's sharp command came from the earphones. Suyu's fire frightened him to death. The restraint of this thing on the mechanical system was too exaggerated, especially for low-level mechanical systems like theirs. The roar of guns and artillery sounded again on the city wall, but it was obviously much thinner than before. Most of their main weapons had been burned by fire just now, and now many of them were temporarily unable to be used, and they could only use secondary weapons, which greatly reduced the enemy's firepower. The sound of artillery fire only lasted for more than 10 seconds before it was suppressed by a roar. The violent impact caused by the war cry exploded at the top of the city wall, and then a large number of figures were knocked away and fell like dumplings. The one who fell inside the city wall was okay and was quickly dragged away for treatment by his companions. But the one who fell outside the city wall was in dire straits and was stabbed into a hedgehog by a short spear before he even hit the ground. In the 5 long minutes just now, everyone in the Knights was beaten to pieces. It was not until Mondel threw Suyu onto the city wall that the situation was relieved. After losing the fire suppression of the contractors on the city wall, the automatic attack miniguns on the wall could not cause so much pressure. The Knights could also use their hands free to shoot the fallen contractors while defending. Ahem! Suyu, who had used the war cry 3 times today, coughed twice to relieve the discomfort in his throat. This skill activates very quickly and has a first-class knockback effect. Suyu is now almost used to rushing into the crowd and roaring when a battle begins. At close range, the enemy has no time to react. Now half of the contractors on the city wall have been cleared by Suyu. He raised his head and looked at the remaining parts on the opposite side, his eyes becoming more and more purple. After exerting force with his right foot and stamping hard on the ground, Suyu faced the incoming artillery fire and charged forward. During the advance, except for the extremely threatening sniper bullets, which he either turned his head to avoid or used his halberd to deflect, he didn't bother to dodge any other attacks. In front of the steel-hardened defense all over his body, these ammunition could only slow down his speed slightly. 2 seconds later, Suyu, who had received an unknown number of rounds of ammunition, successfully rushed towards the crowd. The halberd in his hand swept across, throwing out a black shadow. All standing creatures within 3 meters in front were swept away, and a large number of mechanical fragments and flesh and blood residues were scattered. If the contractors who were knocked away by the battle cry before still had some hope of survival, then those contractors who were killed by Su Yuejuan basically ended up dead without any body parts. He could destroy heavy tanks with one halberd, and not to mention these are remotely crispy. With just 2 blows, thanks to the brutal effect and Beng Jin, there were only 2 members of the mechanical mission left alive on the city wall. They all saved their lives because they fell to the ground. One of them had a mechanical leg failure, and the other one had a mechanical leg failure. Half of one man's arm was swept by Su Yu's halberd and was reduced to pieces. The flesh and blood are weak and the machine ascends. A coquettish red light bloomed from the bodies of the 2 people on the ground. There was no fear on their faces, but extreme enthusiasm. Su Yu glanced at it lightly, then used his halberd to throw the 2 prone human bombs on the ground. Fly out! Bang! Bang! 2 large fireworks exploded in midair on the left and right sides of the city wall, and the air waves blew Su Yu's black cloak on the city wall. In the firelight, his face was uncertain, and his purple eyes looked down at the gathering in the courtyard below. Among the contractors, there was a large mecha more than 3 meters in size that stood out among the crowd. This is a very typical miner mecha. The left arm is a humanoid mechanical palm, and the right arm is a huge mining drill. The mecha looks very bulky, and the grey outer coating is full of scratches. It looks like it has aged. Not small, but the huge feeling of oppression has not diminished at all. If you have the guts, come down. The dull electronic sound sounded in the courtyard, and the mecha's glowing red eye turned to Su Yu on the city wall. This mecha was obviously a melee model and had no means of long-range attack. Moreover, considering its size, it would be a bit difficult to let him go up the city wall, so he could only provoke Su Yu to go down. Come down, you're not in close combat, come and fight with our boss. Yes, as long as you defeat our boss in a duel, we will all surrender. If you are afraid, get out of here. The contractors next to the mecha below also started to help, and they kept shouting. Some of the guys who couldn't restrain themselves even took out their long-range weapons and attacked Su Yu. Su Yu slashed his halberd vertically and shattered an incoming howitzer in the air. He squinted his eyes and observed the mecha below, without any intention of going down. It's a joke. A group of mechanical contractors who hugged each other for warmth said that they would challenge him to a duel. Only if he believed it would there be a ghost. If this sentence was placed in the paradise, after 10 contractors heard it, 9 of them would laugh. The last one who didn't laugh would be because he himself is from the mechanical department. Su Yu can guarantee that if he doesn't face a ruthless attack by a group of people after going down, then his name can be written backwards. Such a group of mechanical systems will unite and attack, covering them with firepower. Putting the halberd back into space, Su Yu took out the Xiaoyun bow, knocked an arrow, opened the bow, and let go. The fire-patterned arrow turned into a beam of red light and rushed down, setting off raging flames in the crowd below. When the flames subsided, there was already a charred corpse on the ground. It was the contractor who made the loudest noise before. It's just a long-range attack. It's not like he doesn't know how to do it. Since he is now condescending, it's time to beat up the drowned dog. He must go down. His mission is to kill the opponent, but before that, he must reduce the opponent's number. As for the mecha, he didn't even try to attack. The opponent's armor was too thick, and the flames basically didn't do much damage to it, even if he used the xia skill that comes with the equipment. When the people below saw that Su Yu was not ready to go down, but instead started to take out bows and arrows to attack, they no longer restrained themselves. All kinds of ammunition were thrown at Su Yu like they were free. In terms of long-range bombing, they had not failed anyone. Amid the roaring explosions, the passionate exchange of fire between the two sides lasted for several minutes. More than half of the ordinary arrows in Su Yu's space were consumed, but the artillery fire in the courtyard showed no signs of weakening. Now Su Yu is leaning against a wall, swallowing the restorative chicken nuggets in his mouth. After feeling the slow recovery of his health, he changed his position along the wall, and then stood up to set up his string. There were scattered in the courtyard below. The contractors were spread out, with the miners' mecha in the center. The contractors were scanning the city wall above with vigilance, their weapons ready to go, waiting for Su Yu to show up. After leaving the cover of the wall, Su Yu quickly identified the target. A contractor holding a huge cannon barrel, holding the string in his hand. Call out! After a beam of red light flashed, a scream came from below. Regardless of the result, he squatted back again. The wall in front of him soon began to tremble violently, and the flames burned in through the gaps, burning Su Yu's silver skin, reflecting a touch of golden red. Chapter 80. Although he moved very quickly, Su Yu was still inevitably hit by several shots, and his health was forcibly deducted. The firepower below was too strong. His only advantage now is his condescending geographical location, and his target is small and flexible. He has high dexterity, and as long as the opponent dares not attack forcefully, he can slowly grind the opponent to death. You killed contractor No. 13,954. The Paradise prompt sounded. He was lucky. It seemed like he had hit the vital point just now. So far, he had shot and killed 6 contractors. He had the advantage of dragging him down, but... Su Yu looked at the sky. The moon was in the sky. Half of the night had passed. He could not drag it out any longer. He had to clear out as many strongholds as possible before the contractors in the imperial capital discovered something was wrong and started a collective riot. Otherwise, it would be the most difficult to clear them later. He never felt that he could defeat the entire imperial capital's contractors with just one of Mondel's cavalry troops. Now he was just playing with a time lag. He was in the dark, so he had an advantage. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look fierce. If it didn't work, he would use up all the food and forcibly melt the metal wall under his feet. By then, with the melted molten steel alone, he would be able to melt all the contractors in the courtyard. Don't doubt his power to make fossil specimens. From the time he entered the world to the present, the number of monsters that have died in his hands has been in the thousands. Even if Su Yu only absorbed a small part, it is still an exaggerated amount. When Su Yu was thinking about whether it was worth it, a strong sense of crisis suddenly spread throughout his body. His expression changed, he rolled to the left, quickly moved to a position with the least sense of crisis, took out a heavy shield he had cast before, and covered his body. The next second, a loud explosion sounded, and 5 large fireballs rose up on the city wall. The violent impact destroyed most of the wall stacks on the city wall. After Su Yu shot and killed 6 people in a row, the contractors of the mechanical mission also became ruthless and took out the stuff from the bottom of the box. They did not hesitate to destroy the city wall that took a lot of resources to build, but also wanted to blow up Su Yu first. Die! As the 5 fireballs exploded, the entire metal city wall began to tremble violently. When the trembling ended, all the weapons on the wall became inactive. Outside the city wall, the knights removed the defensive cover. As for the heavy shields, they were shattered a few minutes ago. Mondel stood among the knights and looked worriedly at the damaged city wall above. The power of such an explosion would, even if Chief Fire didn't die, he would not survive. He turned to look at the 2 remaining spears on the ground, and then pulled a priest beside him. "Elo, let's go, let's rush in and help." On the city wall, a dark figure sat up from the ground. After spitting out a mouthful of dull blood, Su Yu first threw away the fragment of the heavy shield with only one handle left in his hand, and then carefully took off the wolf hair cloak with only some strips of cloth left on his body. He now looked at the item description and saw that there was only 3 points of durability left. He was so angry that his eyes were a little red. Just a little bit, this piece of clothing was completely broken. Clothing equipment with self-healing ability is hard to find. He was very satisfied with this thing. Putting away the cloth strips in his hands, he shook off the black ash on his body, stuffed 2 portions of chicken nuggets into his mouth, and prepared to summon the fire. He would have to kill those things below today. Just as he was about to take action, 2 roars sounded from above. Su Yu looked up and saw 2 giant spears passing through the air one after another, grazing the edge of the city wall and plunging straight into the courtyard behind. Why is Mondel so brave, rushing straight into the enemy's base camp? There was a trace of doubt in Su Yu's mind, but Fang Tian's painted halberd had already appeared in his hand. Since his teammates were all rushing, he naturally couldn't stretch his hips. Outside the wall, a group of knights looked at the 2 spears that jumped over the city wall and plunged into the rear. They all turned to look at a tall knight in the center of the queue. He was the most powerful knight in the team. In terms of strength alone, Mandel is no match for him either. His fighting style is usually reckless. Now he looked at the spear that disappeared from sight, and his body became a little stiff. I used too much strength." Everyone said nothing, but their eyes had the same meaning. "When the boss comes out, you will be dead." The tall knight began to sweat a little on his temples. He pushed away the knights around him, picked up his spear and rushed towards the wall. Smash the wall quickly and save the boss. Everyone quickly followed. The knights outside the wall began to smash the wall in a lively manner, while the mechanical envoys inside the wall were also jumping up and down. Seeing 2 more spears flying towards them, they all started to dodge, mainly because they were afraid of another fire explosion. After the scene was quiet for a moment, the contractors' long guns and cannons began to aim at the 2 spears in the center of the courtyard. Several were placed in the corners of the courtyard, and equipment similar to vacuum cleaners was also moved closer. Bang! Bang! After 2 explosions, the spear exploded, countless metal fragments collapsed, and a dazzling holy light bloomed on the spot. There is no purple fire, fight! The holy light faded, and Mondel and Elro, who had just taken out their spears, were first faced with the muzzle fire that was constantly firing ammunition all around. Elro's pupil shrank, and he quickly raised the staff in his hand. A defensive shield instantly solidified, blocking the ammunition coming from all directions. He turned to look at Mondel, who was also looking confused next to him, and gritted his teeth and said, "You're fucking cheating on me." Without waiting for Mondel to respond, he continued. "You can't be passively defensive all the time. I won't be able to hold on for long. I can't stand for even a moment." "Okay." Mondel agreed quickly without any nonsense, and then the holy light began to shine on his body. Thunder falls. After giving a low shout, Elro swung the staff he held high downwards. The defensive cover immediately collapsed, and various firearms and bullets rushed in, but were blocked by the floating holy light shields on all sides. At the same time, at the moment the defensive cover collapsed, rolling thunderclouds gathered above the courtyard, and then thunder snakes fell from the sky. Chains of lightning scattered in all directions. The sound of gunfire stopped suddenly, and most of the contractors fell into a state of paralysis. This is a control skill that affects a wide range. The attack disappeared, and Mondel just breathed a sigh of relief when a humming giant drill hit his face. After resisting for a moment, the holy light shield was shattered on the spot. The drill hammer hit Mondel's chest, and a white figure appeared like a string. It flew out like an arrow and hit the metal wall behind it hard. After finishing dealing with Mondel, the mecha's cold electronic one-eye looked at Elro, who was not far away. The opponent was already a little exhausted after releasing the thunderous blow. He consumed a lot of mana in a short period of time and made him dizzy. The mecha leaned forward and just took a step towards Elro's direction. The ground in front collapsed with a roar, and countless ferocious gaps spread on the ground. Then, the clods of soil fell, forming a gap in front of the mecha. Deep ravine. Suyu stood up slowly behind the ravine, his halberd trembling slightly in his hand as he shook off the dirt stained by the ground-shaking blow. "You just said a duel, right? Come on.